Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to 6th century Constantinople, where a bizarre cult turned the humble radish into a sacred object of worship. Yes, you heard that right, radishes. Not gold, not relics, not even some fancy mystical symbol. Just root vegetables. And trust me, if you were caught disrespecting a radish in this city, you might not live to see the next harvest season. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below telling me your city and what time it is for you right now. I love imagining where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the bustling markets of Constantinople, where the air is thick with the scent of spices, sweat, and freshly pulled radishes. At first, it seems like any other Byzantine marketplace, merchants haggling, children darting between stalls, the occasional donkey causing chaos. But then you notice something strange. A group of people, dressed in simple robes, kneel before a pile of radishes as if they're praying to an altar. This, my friend, is the raffinisti, the radish worshippers. Their belief that radishes were divine vessels, carrying the essence of the gods. Some even claimed the vegetables could predict the future if sliced the right way. Historians still argue whether this was a spiritual movement or just an elaborate tax evasion scheme. Turns out, holy radishes were exempt from market fees. The real trouble started when the radish worshippers decided their sacred veggies deserved prime marketplace real estate. They storm into rival stalls, overturn baskets of onions, the ultimate insult, and declare their radishes the only true food of the gods. The Byzantine authorities, already dealing with enough drama like, say, the entire empire slowly crumbling, were not amused. One account describes a particularly wild showdown where a radish merchant and a garlic seller got into a full-on theological debate with vegetables as projectiles. The emperor eventually had to step in, banning radish-based rituals before the whole city devolved into a food fight. And here's the weirdest part: some scholars think this wasn't even about radishes at all. There's evidence the cult might have been a front for political dissent, using veggie worship to mock the church and state. Because nothing says rebellion like declaring a turnip holier than the emperor. So next time you crunch into a radish salad, remember you could have been executed for that in 6th century Constantinople. Sleep tight. You're still in Constantinople, but the radish riots are behind you now. Fast forward to July 1518, and suddenly you're in Strasbourg, where the summer heat hangs thick over the cobblestone streets. People are sweating, irritable. And then you hear it. The rhythmic stomping of feet. At first it's just one woman dancing wildly in the square, but within days, hundreds are twirling, leaping, collapsing, convinced they can dance away their sins. Welcome to history's strangest epidemic, the dancing plague. So before you get too comfortable, make sure you're subscribed if you enjoy these bizarre bedtime stories. And hey, drop a comment with your city and current time. It's always fun to see where in the world people are listening from tonight. Now, pull up your blanket, adjust your pillow, and let's slip into this surreal chapter together. The first dancer was Frau Trophia. On a sweltering July afternoon, she simply started. No music, no festival, just an ordinary housewife possessed by sudden, compulsive movement. Within a week, 34 more joined her. By month's end, nearly 400 people were dancing themselves to exhaustion in the streets, their feet bleeding through worn shoes. Here's where it gets weird. Local physicians diagnosed this as hot blood medieval medicine at its finest and prescribed more dancing. Authorities actually built stages and hired musicians, believing the dancers needed to get it out of their system. Spoiler, this didn't help. People kept dancing until their ribs broke from exertion or they dropped dead from strokes. Modern scholars still can't agree on what caused it. Some say it was mass psychogenic illness, a kind of social contagion of the mind. Others point to ergot poisoning from moldy rye bread, the same thing linked to Salem witch trials. But the creepiest theory that this was a doomsday cult convinced the world would end unless they danced non-stop for 30 days. The strangest detail: contemporary accounts mention that many dancers screamed for help even as their bodies kept moving against their will. Imagine being trapped in your own body, dancing toward death while begging someone to stop you. Eventually the plague burned itself out literally. Come September, the city staged massive bonfires to purify the air, and the surviving dancers finally collapsed. The episode vanished from history as suddenly as it began, leaving behind one haunting question: what would make hundreds of people dance themselves to death? The year is 1927, and you're strolling through Montparnasse when a peculiar scent stops you mid-step, a mix of gardenias, burnt hair, and something suspiciously metallic. Following your nose leads you to a dimly lit salon where women sit perfectly still, their faces slathered in glowing green paste. Welcome to the beauty cult of the Great I Am, where toxic makeup meets apocalyptic prophecy in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. Before we go deeper, don't forget to subscribe if you are enjoying this historical rabbit hole. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest beauty trend you've ever tried now. Let your eyelids grow heavy as we step into this gilded nightmare. The leader was a failed Broadway actor named Guy Ballard who rebranded himself as Saint Germain, claiming to channel an 18th century alchemist. His wife Edna mixed up their signature Youth Radiance cream in their Paris apartment, promising eternal beauty with a formula containing, wait for it, mercury, arsenic, and radium. Because nothing says glow like radioactive face paint. Here's how it worked. Followers, mostly wealthy socialites, applied the cream nightly while reciting incantations to activate their divine light. The catch: the cream caused open sores, hair loss, and in at least 3 documented cases, acute heavy metal poisoning. When confronted, Ballard insisted this was just negative energies leaving the body. Meanwhile, jazz musicians in the movement composed hymns about ascending to Venus, yes, the planet, holding jam sessions where they'd vibrate at higher frequencies. Historians found sheet music with handwritten notes like "play this chord to banish capitalists" and "saxophone solo equals gateway to fourth dimension." The cult's downfall came when French authorities noticed members were buying suspicious amounts of uranium ore for spiritual purposes. At trial, Ballard's defense was that he wasn't selling poison, he was selling transformation. The judge wasn't convinced. Here's what still baffles researchers: medical records show some users did temporarily look younger, likely because the toxins caused facial swelling that smoothed wrinkles. A rare case where the cure was literally worse than aging. The year is 1420, and you're trudging through the mud of medieval Bohemia when a group of armed men stop you at a checkpoint. Are you a warrior, priest, or useless eater? One demands, poking your belly with a spear. Welcome to Taborite territory, where this radical cult decided to solve class inequality by banning everyone except soldiers and clergy. Before we enter this peasant-free zone, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying these historical deep dives. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest membership requirement you've ever encountered. Now, let's tiptoe into this social experiment gone wrong. The Taborites began as idealistic followers of Jan Hus, the reformer who wanted to simplify Christianity. But after Hus was burned at the stake in 1415, his followers went full Mad Max. They declared a hilltop town called Tabor their HQ and instituted what historians call the world's most aggressive affirmative action program. Here's their 3-point plan: execute all nobility, ban peasants from working fields declared slavery, force everyone to either fight or preach. You can imagine how well this worked. By 1421, Tabor had 0 farmers, 0 functioning mills, dozens of very confused former shoemakers now holding pikes. The cult's solution: raid neighboring towns for food while shouting Bible verses. Their battle cry was literally "kill them all, God will know his own," a phrase later borrowed by the Cathars. But here's the bizarre twist: the Taborites accidentally invented communism. Their radical equality included free love marriage equals oppression, collective child rearing parents equals bourgeois, mandatory public singing, off-key singers were re-educated. It all collapsed when they ran out of neighbors to rob. Starving Taborites started eating their own horses, then their boots, then finally surrendered. Modern historians still debate were these visionary social reformers, or just the world's worst urban planners. The year is 1420, and you're trudging through the mud of medieval Bohemia when a group of armed men stop you at a checkpoint. Are you a warrior, priest, or useless eater, one demands, poking your belly with a spear. Welcome to Taborite territory, where this radical cult decided to solve class inequality by banning everyone except soldiers and clergy. Before we enter this peasant-free zone, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying these historical deep dives. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest membership requirement you've ever encountered. Now, let's tiptoe into this social experiment gone wrong. The Taborites began as idealistic followers of Jan Hus, the reformer who wanted to simplify Christianity. But after Hus was burned at the stake in 1415, his followers went full Mad Max. They declared a hilltop town called Tabor their HQ and instituted what historians call the world's most aggressive affirmative action program. Here's their three-point plan: execute all nobility, ban peasants from working fields, declared slavery, force everyone to either fight or preach. You can imagine how well this worked. By 1421, Tabor had 0 farmers, 0 functioning mills, dozens of very confused former shoemakers now holding pikes. The cult's solution: raid neighboring towns for food while shouting Bible verses. Their battle cry was literally "kill them all, God will know his own," a phrase later borrowed by the Cathars. But here's the bizarre twist: the Taborites accidentally invented communism. Their radical equality included free love marriage equals oppression, collective child rearing parents equals bourgeois, mandatory public singing, off-key singers were re-educated. It all collapsed when they ran out of neighbors to rob. Starving Taborites started eating their own horses, then their boots, then finally surrendered. Modern historians still debate were these visionary social reformers, or just the world's worst urban planners. The year is 1420, and you're trudging through the mud of medieval Bohemia when a group of armed men stop you at a checkpoint. Are you a warrior, priest, or useless eater, one demands, poking your belly with a spear. Welcome to Taborite territory, where this radical cult decided to solve class inequality by banning everyone except soldiers and clergy. Before we enter this peasant-free zone, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying these historical deep dives. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest membership requirement you've ever encountered. Now, let's tiptoe into this social experiment gone wrong. The Taborites began as idealistic followers of Jan Hus, the reformer who wanted to simplify Christianity. But after Hus was burned at the stake in 1415, his followers went full Mad Max. They declared a hilltop town called Tabor their HQ and instituted what historians call the world's most aggressive affirmative action program. Here's their three-point plan: execute all nobility, ban peasants from working fields, declared slavery, force everyone to either fight or preach. You can imagine how well this worked. By 1421, Tabor had 0 farmers, 0 functioning mills, dozens of very confused former shoemakers now holding pikes. The cult's solution: raid neighboring towns for food while shouting Bible verses. Their battle cry was literally "kill them all, God will know his own," a phrase later borrowed by the Cathars. But here's the bizarre twist: the Taborites accidentally invented communism. Their radical equality included free love marriage equals oppression, collective child rearing parents equals bourgeois, mandatory public singing, off-key singers were re-educated. It all collapsed when they ran out of neighbors to rob. Starving Taborites started eating their own horses, then their boots, then finally surrendered. Modern historians still debate were these visionary social reformers, or just the world's worst urban planners. The year is 1420, and you're trudging through the mud of medieval Bohemia when a group of armed men stop you at a checkpoint. Are you a warrior, priest, or useless eater, one demands, poking your belly with a spear. Welcome to Taborite territory, where this radical cult decided to solve class inequality by banning everyone except soldiers and clergy. Before we enter this peasant-free zone, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying these historical deep dives. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest membership requirement you've ever encountered. Now, let's tiptoe into this social experiment gone wrong. The Taborites began as idealistic followers of Jan Hus, the reformer who wanted to simplify Christianity. But after Hus was burned at the stake in 1415, his followers went full Mad Max. They declared a hilltop town called Tabor their HQ and instituted what historians call the world's most aggressive affirmative action program. Here's their three-point plan: execute all nobility, ban peasants from working fields declared slavery, force everyone to either fight or preach. You can imagine how well this worked. By 1421, Tabor had 0 farmers, 0 functioning mills, dozens of very confused former shoemakers now holding pikes. The cult's solution: raid neighboring towns for food while shouting Bible verses. Their battle cry was literally "kill them all, God will know his own," a phrase later borrowed by the Cathars. But here's the bizarre twist: the Taborites accidentally invented communism. Their radical equality included free love marriage equals oppression, collective child rearing parents equals bourgeois, mandatory public singing off-key singers were re-educated. It all collapsed when they ran out of neighbors to rob. Starving Taborites started eating their own horses, then their boots, then finally surrendered. Modern historians still debate were these visionary social reformers, or just the world's worst urban planners. The year is 1420, and you're trudging through the mud of medieval Bohemia when a group of armed men stop you at a checkpoint. Are you a warrior, priest, or useless eater? One demands, poking your belly with a spear. Welcome to Taborite territory, where this radical cult decided to solve class inequality by banning everyone except soldiers and clergy. Before we enter this peasant-free zone, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying these historical deep dives. And tell me in the comments what's the weirdest membership requirement you've ever encountered. Now, let's tiptoe into this social experiment gone wrong. The Taborites began as idealistic followers of Jan Hus, the reformer who wanted to simplify Christianity. But after Hus was burned at the stake in 1415, his followers went full Mad Max. They declared a hilltop town called Tabor their HQ and instituted what historians call the world's most aggressive affirmative action program. Here's their three-point plan: execute all nobility, ban peasants from working fields declared slavery, force everyone to either fight or preach. You can imagine how well this worked. By 1421, Tabor had 0 farmers, 0 functioning mills, dozens of very confused former shoemakers now holding pikes. The cult's solution: raid neighboring towns for food while shouting Bible verses. Their battle cry was literally "kill them all, God will know his own," a phrase later borrowed by the Cathars. But here's the bizarre twist: the Taborites accidentally invented communism. Their radical equality included free love marriage equals oppression, collective child rearing parents equals bourgeois, mandatory public singing off-key singers were re-educated. It all collapsed when they ran out of neighbors to rob. Starving Taborites started eating their own horses, then their boots, then finally surrendered. Modern historians still debate were these visionary social reformers, or just the world's worst urban planners. The smell of burnt wiring hits your nostrils as you enter a Detroit basement in 1955, where a group of men in aluminum foil hats huddle around what looks like a refrigerator welded to a tractor seat. Brothers, tonight we breach the fourth dimension. Their leader announces, throwing a switch that blows out every street light on the block. Welcome to the cosmic circle, where cult meets Cold War tech in the most disastrous DIY time travel project. Before we leap through these temporal mishaps, hit subscribe if you enjoy watching good intentions crash into physics. And confess below what's the most spectacularly failed DIY project you've attempted. Now, let's set our watches to disaster. The cult's founder was a former auto plant manager named Wallace Eckert, who became convinced Bible verses contained blueprints for time machines. His 87-page manifesto Ezekiel's Engine claimed, the Book of Daniel describes flux capacitors. The Tower of Babel was a failed temporal antenna. Anyone could time travel with enough Ford parts and faith. By 1957, the group had constructed 7 chrono engines across Michigan basements using washing machine motors, repurposed tank gyroscopes, 300 pounds of magnetized jello for temporal lubrication. Their test logs read like sci-fi slapstick. April 12. Brother Carl vanished for 37 minutes but returned insisting he'd visited 1982 described flying metal chariots later identified as commercial airliners. June 8. Machine 3 teleport Mrs. Henderson's cat 3 feet left. Cat unamused. The FBI raided their workshops not for cult activity, but because they kept blacking out Detroit's power grid. At trial, Eckert argued they were pioneering chrononauts, not tax-evading lunatics. The judge sentenced them to community service repairing all the appliances they'd cannibalized. Historians found one intact time engine in 2012. Engineering analysis it produced exactly 0.0001% of the energy needed to toast a Pop-Tart, let alone fracture space-time. Yet their legacy endures. Modern quantum physicists still reference Eckert's magnetized jello hypothesis as what not to do. The roar of jet engines shakes your seat as you buckle into a 1995 Korean Air flight with an unusual destination, the edge of the world. Around you, cult members clutch Bibles and barf bags while flight attendants distribute pamphlets titled Why NASA Lied About Gravity. Welcome aboard the Flat Earth Apocalypse Tour where faith meets aeronautics in history's most ill-conceived joyride. Before we taxi toward certain doom, secure your tray table and subscribe if you enjoy truth stranger than fiction journeys. And tell me below what conspiracy theory makes you laugh the hardest now. Let's cruise into the wild blue yonder. Korean cult leader Lee Jang-rim raised $4 million from followers to prove biblical cosmology by chartering 747s. Flying due east until hitting the firmament wall. Filming the collision for a divine infomercial. The Eternal Life Tours package included in-flight lectures on satanic ball earth deception. Special edge spotting binoculars, regular binoculars painted gold. A $100,000 life insurance payout if the plane crashed into heaven. Flight logs reveal the pilots paid triple their normal salary would circle Incheon airport for hours. Claim turbulence was firmament resistance. Occasionally discover Greenland as new undiscovered lands. The scam unraveled when a passenger noticed they kept finding the same unknown mountain range, the Alps, seen from different angles. Investigators discovered Lee spent most funds on Jeju Island timeshares. Here's the kicker, modern flat earthers still cite these flights as evidence, despite the cult's own videographer admitting they faked wall of light footage using a disco ball and fog machine. As your plane banks over the very curved horizon, consider this: the only thing these believers proved was how far people will go to avoid admitting they're wrong. Fasten your seatbelts, delusion has turbulence. The scent of pine sap and gasoline fills your lungs as you trek through 1970s Oregon forests, where the whine of chainsaws competes with ecstatic chanting. Ahead, a man in a neon orange robe swings an axe at a 300-year-old Douglas fir, screaming "Die, demon tree!" Meet Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh's lesser-known rival, the timber tantrum cult that believed photosynthesis was stealing human souls. Before we dodge falling sequoias, grab your hard hat and subscribe if you enjoy nature's weirdest enemies. And tell me below what's the most baffling hatred you've witnessed toward an inanimate object. Now, let's branch into this wooden nightmare. Self-proclaimed eco-exorcist Jeremiah Greenspan launched his movement after a mescaline trip convinced him trees were ancient psychic vampires, plotting with houseplants to suffocate humanity. Responsible for bad weather via leaf telepathy. His 1974 manifesto Sapocalypse Now outlined the Great Clearing, destroy all vegetation west of the Rockies, pave everything with reflective aluminum, free mankind from wooden oppression. By 1976, the cult occupied 7 Oregon tree farms, where members held 24/7 logging meditations, worshipped steel chainsaws as holy blades, attempted to genetically engineer a vegan tree. It died in 3 hours. The movement gained brief notoriety when members liberated Portland's Rose Garden, leaving behind pamphlets reading thorns are Satan's dental work. Botanists noted the odd precision they only destroyed plants with visible rings, believing these were soul prisons. Greenspan's downfall came when he tried to bulldoze a sequoia allegedly containing Hitler's spirit. The 2,000-year-old tree dropped a branch on his RV. Now preserved in a state park, the cult's former compound features a park ranger tour called When Paranoia Meets Photosynthesis. Ecologists still debate, was this deep ecological satire, or did these people genuinely hate chlorophyll? Either way, they invented the world's most aggressive landscaping service. The scent of mimeograph ink fills your nose as you enter a 1950s Chicago storefront where 12 people sit staring at a toaster. Channeling session begins now. Announces their leader as the appliance suddenly pops, prompting frantic scribbling in notebooks. Welcome to the Cosmic Communist Cookbook, where a cult believed Marxist aliens from Venus were sending recipes for world revolution via household electronics. Before we make contact with interplanetary comrades, adjust your tinfoil hat and subscribe if you enjoy well-done historical absurdity. And tell me below what's the strangest message you've ever convinced yourself you received. Now, let's dial into this dial-up delusion. Former shoe salesman turned prophet Wilbur Mercer claimed a Venusian collective called the Red Star Soviet contacted him through his waffle iron in 1952. His cult's core beliefs: Marx and Engels were extraterrestrials. Kitchen appliances were dialectic transmitters. The USSR had fallen because Earth communists weren't following the cosmic recipe. Their daily rituals included baking for the revolution, making cupcakes according to transmitted instructions, holding seances with unplugged radios, interpreting burnt toast patterns as 5-year plans. The FBI's declassified files reveal agents' bewilderment at Mercer's manifesto of appliances, which stated blenders could liquefy bourgeois thought. Members genuinely believed they were downloading alien economic theory. One diary entry describes a vacuum cleaner transmitting Marx's lost chapter on orbital collectivism. The cult's downfall came during the 1959 kitchen debate when Nixon and Khrushchev's televised exchange accidentally aired during a channeling session. Half the members defected, convinced the politicians were Venusian double agents. Historians found Mercer's final transmission, a waffle iron imprint reading "Abandon capitalist toast." Was it mass hysteria or performance art? The toaster remains silent for now. The smell of strong black coffee burns your nostrils as you enter a 1920s Moscow warehouse where haggard men and women pace like caged animals, slapping their own faces to stay awake. Sleep is bourgeois deception. Their leader screeches, gulping another cup of tar-like brew. Welcome to the Soviet sleeplessness movement, where a cult took "I'll sleep when I'm dead" terrifyingly literally. Before we yawn through this wide-eyed nightmare, rub those tired eyes and subscribe if you enjoy history's most exhausting rabbit holes. And confess below what's the longest you've gone without sleep, and what bizarre things did you start believing. Now, let's fight our eyelids and dive in. Revolutionary scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, yes, the actual father of astronautics, planted the seed with his 1915 essay claiming sleep was a capitalist plot to waste productive hours. Unnecessary with proper electrical stimulation. The opiate of the proletariat. Sound familiar? By 1923, the nocturnal vanguard cult had turned this into dogma with rules like, members must stay awake 22 hours minimum. Naps counted as class treason. Yawners were sent to re-education cots. Their headquarters looked like a mad scientist's lab crossed with a night shift factory, walls covered in blinking light panels to trick circadian rhythms. A stimulation station where members got zapped with car batteries. A chalkboard tracking the world record 14 days, set by a woman who later tried to eat a wall clock. The cult's newsletter Red Eyeballs published scientific breakthroughs like, dreams are just capitalist propaganda your brain makes up. If you feel tired, drink molten wax, it seals the sleep demons inside. It all collapsed when members started hallucinating that Lenin's corpse was giving them bedtime stories. Modern sleep researchers estimate the group's methods caused permanent neural damage in 60% of participants. The tragic irony: Tsiolkovsky himself slept 8 hours nightly while his followers tortured themselves awake. Some revolutions, it seems, are better left dreamed about. The metallic tang of blood hangs in the damp Flanders air as you join a procession of 12th century penitents, their bare backs crisscrossed with wounds, their eyes burning with feverish devotion. Suddenly, a man collapses at your feet, gasping, "Nail me! For the love of Christ, nail me to something." Welcome to the Brotherhood of the Holy Wound, where medieval Europeans took imitating Christ's passion to chilling new extremes. Before we wince through this self-mortification marathon, take a deep breath and subscribe if you enjoy history's most uncomfortable faith expressions. And tell me below, what's the most extreme thing you've done or seen done for a belief? Now, let's tread carefully into this bloodied chapter. The movement began innocently enough in 1084 when Hermit Peter of Amiens suggested believers should wear hair shirts, fast regularly, maybe occasionally flagellate themselves. Within a century, it had escalated into what historians call competitive crucifixion. By 1180, the cult's rituals included self-whipping with iron-tipped flails, discipline stars, rolling naked in rosebushes, Christ's crown, temporary self-nailings to barn doors using sterilized horseshoe nails. The most devoted members, called living crosses, would carve Psalm 22 into their chests, have friends suspend them from actual crosses for 33 minutes, 1 minute per year of Christ's life, drink vinegar while hanging to better share the Savior's thirst. Records from Bruges describe a 1192 incident where 3 men got into a theological fist fight over whose wounds most accurately replicated the spear thrust to Christ's side. The winner, a baker who'd impaled himself on his own oven poker. Modern scholars still argue whether this was a sincere religious ecstasy, B, collective mental illness from ergot poisoning, C, the world's most hardcore method of avoiding feudal labor. The church finally banned the practice when too many nobles were skipping crusades to self-crucify at home. Turns out, it's hard to retake Jerusalem when your best knights keep nailing themselves to the stable door. The year is 1987, and you're squeezing into a California banquet hall where 37 people sit around a table piled with rotting food. "This is definitely the Last Supper," whispers a woman adjusting her tinfoil hat, for the 37th time. Welcome to the Church of the Final Reckoning, where doomsday keeps getting rescheduled like a cosmic game of the apocalypse is always 5 minutes away. Before we RSVP to this never-ending farewell party, hit subscribe if you enjoy watching prophecy fail in real time. And tell me below, what's something you prepared way too early for now. Let's pull up a chair at history's most awkward last meal. Self-proclaimed prophet Harold Camping made headlines in 1982 when he calculated Christ's return for September 6, 1994. When that flopped, his cult rebranded as the Adjustable Rapture Movement. With these theological innovations, doomsday was like a divine train, sometimes delayed but always coming. Each failed prediction meant they'd purified their calculations. Followers should hold weekly final suppers just in case. By 1987, their rituals had become bizarrely cozy, potluck Armageddons where everyone brought rapture-ready casseroles. A sin ledger where members confessed minor faults before each predicted end. I didn't recycle the doomsday pamphlets. Matching "See You in Heaven" tracksuits for group ascension. The real tragedy: many members quit jobs. Why work when eternity starts Tuesday? Sold homes, the checks in the heavenly mail. Died waiting, including Camping himself in 2013. Modern scholars note the cult's accidental brilliance. By making doomsday a moving target, they created the perfect unfalsifiable belief system. Their final billboard read, "Sorry we missed you. Check back soon." And here we are today, still waiting, still wondering, is it better to be wrong with friends than right alone? The table's set, the casserole's cold, and the only thing certain is uncertainty itself. The stories we've wandered through tonight: radish worshippers, dancing plagues, time-traveling cults, all whisper the same soft lesson about human nature. We're meaning-making creatures, you and I, forever stitching patterns into the chaos, building ladders of belief to reach past the stars or simply to touch tomorrow. As your eyelids grow heavy, consider how these bizarre tales aren't really about cults at all. They're mirrors reflecting our shared hunger for belonging, our terror of uncertainty, our stubborn hope that someone, somewhere has the answers. The truth, perhaps, is gentler. We're all just figuring it out as we go, one sleepy blink at a time. Let these stories drift through your mind like clouds. Maybe they'll color your dreams with dancing radishes or Marxist toasters. Or maybe they'll fade into the quiet hum of the night, leaving only the comfort that comes from knowing no matter how strange history gets, morning always comes. The fan whirs softly. The pillow cradles your head, and somewhere out there, the stars spin on, indifferent to our predictions but kind enough to let us keep trying. Sleep now. The world can wait. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the softest pair of historical pajamas as you become a Byzantine silk merchant in Constantinople, where one wrong move could leave you either swimming in gold or swimming with the fishes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and current time. Let's see who's drifting through the 6th century with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first cathedral bell punches through your dream like an overeager tax collector. Your eyes fly open to a sunbeam cutting through the lattice window, precisely angled to stab directly into your retinas. 6:17 a.m. in Constantinople. The city's been awake for hours. You roll off your straw mattress, the luxury merchant model that only gives you medium back pain, and nearly step on a sleeping cat. It glares at you with the disdain only Byzantine felines master. This one probably traces its lineage to Empress Theodora's favorite Mauser. The morning ritual begins. Splash vinegary wine on your face, the ancient equivalent of espresso. Untangle your Zangian belt, the buckle always fights back. Check your hidden floorboard stash. Yep, the emergency gold coins still glitter accusingly. As you step into the street, the Marmara sea breeze slaps you with a cocktail of fish guts, incense, and that distinct imperial capital aroma, part sewage, part decadence. A slave boy nearly bowls you over carrying a basket of live crabs, while two priests argue over whether silk trousers constitute heresy. Just another Tuesday. Fun fact: that wine face wash wasn't just bad life choices. Vinegar was Byzantium's antibacterial wonder drug. Scholars found recipes using it for everything from teeth cleaning to, let's just say, unclogging drains. Historians still debate whether Byzantine merchants actually wore those ridiculous pointy hats shown in mosaics. Professor Leonidas claims their artistic license, while Dr. Aisha maintains they were the athleisure wear of their day. You're calculating today's silk markup when a shadow falls across your path. It's Georgios the spice seller, smelling like a walking Christmas market. Heard about the Sardis shipment, he murmurs. Bandits. Or bandits. He makes air quotes, centuries before they're invented. The unspoken truth hangs between you. In Constantinople, accidents are rarely accidental. You adjust your money belt and head toward the docks, where the real game begins. You tiptoe past the dozing guard in the corridor, your silk slippers making almost no sound on the mosaic inlaid floor. The bronze doors of the royal workshop are just ahead, engraved with an image of Emperor Justinian glaring at would-be intruders, though some mischievous craftsman had cleverly altered the emperor's eyes to look cross-eyed. Password, comes a raspy voice from behind the door. Purple is more loyal than gold, you whisper, slipping a silver coin stamped with a double-headed eagle from your sleeve. The door opens just enough for you to squeeze through sideways. The air inside the workshop is so thick you could slice it. 20 Syrian craftsmen are hunched over low workbenches, their fingers dancing across silk, vats bubbling with rare dyes from the Indian Ocean. Your gaze is immediately drawn to a bolt of deep crimson silk shimmering in the morning light. It looks as if someone had woven the sunset into fabric. Don't touch. Chief Dyer Zosimus swats away your reaching hand. This one's an unexpected gift for the Persian prince. He winks meaningfully. Suddenly, you understand why that Persian envoy, after wearing similar fabric last time, ended up scratching himself so badly he jumped into the Tigris. Fun fact: the Byzantines used to weave fine iron wire into silk to create a miraculous effect when the emperor processed through the city. Sunlight would make his robes gleam as if divinely lit. Modern analysis has found traces of lizard blood on these wires, though no one knows why. Zosimus presses a wax-sealed scroll of parchment into your hand. New formula. The Empress wants a blue that changes color with temperature to embarrass the Bulgarian ambassador at the banquet, he explains with a sly smile. You tuck the formula carefully into your inner pocket. This thing is worth more than your life. Academic debate. Historians still argue whether Byzantine color-changing silk was a chemical marvel or pure political theater. In 2018, a team at MIT claimed to have recreated the effect, but their sample only shifted from blue to black at 300 degrees Celsius, not exactly ideal for evening wear, the paper's author admitted glumly. As you leave, you notice a young apprentice in the corner stitching strange symbols into the silk. His needlework doesn't resemble any church pattern, it looks more like Arabic numerals. Alarmingly, the numbers seem to be calculating weak points in Constantinople's city walls. You pretend not to notice, but tomorrow, you'll definitely be having tea with that friend of yours in the secret police. The marketplace roared around you like a pot of boiling stew. You had just dodged an Armenian merchant hawking authentic fragments of the True Cross. His crate held at least 20 genuine pieces when the cloying scent of Anatolian honey caught your nose. That's when a bejeweled hand landed on your shoulder. My dear friend. Persian merchant Mahmud beamed, his smile even heavier than his musk. I hear you've recently acquired a batch of special indigo. His eyes flicked toward the secret pocket beneath your robe where the formula was stashed. You both launched into your familiar dance of commerce, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, circling a spice stall like the nymphs and satyrs eternally chasing each other in palace frescoes. Fun fact, Byzantine merchants used a spice code, snapping cinnamon sticks into varying lengths to convey messages. Archaeologists found oddly arranged cinnamon fragments in one merchant's tomb, possibly spelling out, "Beware the tax collector, he ate garlic today." Feigning interest in a pile of moldy saffron, you heard Mahmud lower his voice, "The caravan from Samarkand vanished last week. Official word is bandits, but..." He tapped his silver teapot, dented with a crescent moon motif. "My camel driver swears he saw blue light flickering in the desert like Greek fire." A squad of royal guards stepped past, their scale armor clattering. Instantly, you and Mahmud switched to loud haggling. "This pepper's terrible," you exclaimed, grabbing a handful and tossing it at a stray cat. The cat sneezed and bolted. "That's because you lack true appreciation," Mahmud shot back, producing an ornate jade vial. "Now this is for connoisseurs." Inside was black powder, smelling of lightning and brimstone, the legendary breath of death, used by Persians for smoke signals. Academic debate. Byzantine records claim Persian merchants trained parrots as spies, though scholars argue whether this was fact or slander. In 2015, Istanbul University experiments showed that African grey parrots can be taught to repeat military passwords, but they far preferred gossiping about the cooks. As the deal concluded, Mahmud accidentally left behind a silk pouch. You didn't open it until you were back at your warehouse. Inside were silver coins and a charred scrap of silk embroidered with the very same symbols you'd seen in the workshop that morning. Suddenly, your wine tasted of iron. The warehouse's rats rustled out an urgent alarm, a better burglar alarm than any bell. You had just stuffed the suspicious silk pouch into a barrel of herring to mask its scent when a knock sounded, 3 long, 2 short. It was Lydia, the Assyrian woman who could sell Tyrian purple at princely prices. Today she was wrapped in a faded old cloak, looking like an ordinary fishmonger. That illusion vanished when she parted her collar to reveal a flash of lightning bright purple lining, the kind of color that drove the Roman Senate mad and bankrupted Byzantine royalty. Your pupils dilated involuntarily, a merchant's instinctive reaction like a wolf sighting prey. "Drifted in from the port of Tyre," Lydia whispered, her voice salty with sea air. "Enough for 3 sacred robes." She opened her palm, revealing a handkerchief-sized square of purple cloth. That scrap alone was worth your entire warehouse of silk. You reached out to touch it, but she snapped her fingers closed. First, tell me where to find ice silk. Fun fact: Byzantine nobles used silk-wrapped ice blocks to create portable air conditioning. Servants would wave these chilled bundles to cool banquets. Archaeologists have discovered lead ice boxes in palace drains. Residue inside suggests they may have added rose oil too, making this history's first aromatic air conditioning. You pretended to rearrange the shelves to buy time. So-called ice silk was a special weave that produced a cooling sensation in hot weather, its formula locked away deep in the imperial library. Just last week, a drunken librarian had let something slip at your favorite tavern. Old place. Old price, you finally said, scrawling a symbol on the wall in charcoal, a sign pointing to an abandoned warehouse by the docks. Lydia nodded, but suddenly grabbed your wrist, her nails lacquered with polish mixed from that very purple dye. Watch that Persian, her lips barely moved. Last month in Alexandria, he bought 20 ounces of arsenic. Both of you froze as the rooftop tiles gave a faint crack. Lydia slipped through the back door like a shadow, the purple fabric vanishing beneath her tattered cloak. You grabbed a bundle of plain silk to cover the herring barrel, just in time to see a grey parrot flutter through the skylight, its claws glinting with what looked like metal. Academic debate. Modern chemists have found bromine in Tyrian purple, explaining its durability but sparking new questions. How did the ancients extract it? A 2004 study suggested symbiotic bacteria in certain Mediterranean carrion-eating sea snails may be responsible, but the scholarly debate rages on. The noonday sun turned the golden horn into a blinding bronze mirror. You crouched beneath a dockside awning, gnawing on pickled fish with figs, the Byzantine version of fast food, though the fish might well have been older than the empire itself. The mingled scents of salt and tar reminded you of the old Navy cook's joke: we call this seafood stew because after eating it, you'll either meet Poseidon or the physician. Suddenly, a blinding blue flash erupted from the harbor. Instinctively, you hit the ground, fig jam splattering across your chest like an abstract painting. 300 yards away, eerie flames danced across the water at the naval testing grounds, liquid demons leaping atop the waves. This was the stuff of legend, Greek fire, the empire's deadliest secret. Seventh failure, muttered an old fisherman beside you, sipping resinous wine. Last time they set the governor's wig ablaze. Fun fact: Greek fire operators had to sign 30-year secrecy oaths. Yet sailors passed around a folk remedy claiming wine could extinguish the flames. Archaeologists uncovered an unusually large number of amphorae in one warship wreck. Experts still debate whether this was military stock or simply the crew's anti-fire comfort supply. As you dusted yourself off, you noticed two merchants in Venetian garb casually jotting down the duration of the flames. They pretended to be inventorying olive oil barrels, but one man's tablet clearly sketched the Navy's defensive layout. Worse, they were using that distinctive purplish-red ink matching Lydia's earlier warning about the Persian arsenic packaging. A particularly loud explosion sent the dock's pigeons skyward in a frantic cloud. Amid the chaos, a slender figure darted from the naval warehouse, the silhouette unmistakably Lydia's. Under her arm, she carried a long, wrapped bundle that looked suspiciously like a prototype Greek fire projector. Academic debate: scholars remain split over Greek fire's formula between the petroleum faction, the pine resin faction, and the Byzantine alien tech faction. In 2016, an experiment combining saltpeter, asphalt, and beeswax reproduced similar effects, but after 3 weeks in the hospital, the inventor was gently advised by the academic board to suspend further research. You decided to forego the rest of your lunch. Rising to your feet, you noticed a charred scrap of paper stuck to your boot. A few faint words remained legible: Ice House. Midnight. And your pickled fish was now being eyed hungrily by that metal-clawed parrot. Ah! What a surprise encounter! Venetian merchant Tommaso's flamboyant accent made your gums ache. He planted himself in front of your stall like an over-decorated gondola, at least 3 utterly unnecessary daggers swinging from his gold-embroidered belt. My dear friend, I hear you've recently acquired a batch of unusually resilient linen. You pretended to sort through the silks, fingers quietly brushing the hidden compartment beneath the counter where a silver-plated dagger rested, its hilt inscribed, "From a Grateful Assassin." Meanwhile, Tommaso's attendants were casually rifling through your wares with the practiced ease of seasoned customs officers. Fun fact: Venetian merchants often smuggled silk samples inside hidden compartments in rings. The British Museum holds a ring from 540 AD with a gemstone that twists to reveal a tiny cavity. Traces of Chinese mulberry silk DNA were found inside. "Just ordinary stock," you replied, unfurling a bolt of crimson silk to block Tommaso's view of the back room. Though treated with a touch of Rhodian honey as softener. That recipe was pure fiction, but enough to send Venetian traders on a 6-month quest to torment their poor bees. Suddenly, Tommaso leaned in, a chemical assault of garlic and rose perfume. "In Venice, we have a saying, a shared trade is a long-lived trade." He handed you a pomegranate, its skin etched with the symbol of St. Mark's winged lion. When you took it, the weight felt wrong. Cracking it open, you found a rolled-up micromap stuffed among the seeds. Military fortifications marked along the Black Sea coast. Academic debate: historians continue to argue whether the Venetian spy network truly penetrated the Byzantine court. In 2019, an archived monastery record revealed that a certain Venetian silk buyer made regular visits to the Imperial Observatory. Whether to negotiate business or steal astronomical data remains an unsolved mystery. Halfway through the exchange, a sudden commotion swept the market. The purple-trimmed robes of a tax official appeared near the spice stalls. Tommaso instantly switched into mute beggar mode, while his attendants began chanting rapid prayers in Venetian dialect. Later you'd learn this was their official business interruption protocol. In the midst of the chaos, you noticed the pomegranate seeds arranged into the shape of an arrow pointing straight toward the rendezvous spot mentioned in the encrypted message you'd received that morning. Too much of a coincidence. You suddenly found yourself missing that old rival of yours, the one who only ever slipped laxatives into your wine. You were scattering breadcrumbs for the dockside pigeons, ostensibly checking for suspicious message tubes tied to their legs, when you were suddenly surrounded by a squad of guards adorned with purple feathered helms. Their captain, stone-faced, handed you a porphyry box, the kind usually reserved for death warrants or divorce decrees. Your stomach dropped like a lead weight until you noticed the box felt unusually light. "His Majesty thanks you for moderating the silk prices last month," the captain said, his words carefully chosen as though dancing through a minefield. "This is a token of appreciation." He deliberately raised his voice so the watching crowd could hear, while his eyes added a silent message: "We know what you did." Fun fact: Byzantine royal letters often used invisible ink written with onion juice and revealed by fire. Modern spectral analysis has shown that some documents contained a second layer of text written in fish glue, only readable under sunlight at a specific angle. It wasn't until you slipped into your warehouse that you dared open the box. Inside lay a single sheet of gold foil, etched with the Empress's favorite chariot team emblem. Flipping it over, you found faint scratches forming a sequence of numbers, 7-12-4. Either betting numbers for the hippodrome races or a reference code to a book deep within the royal library. You feared it was the latter, and that particular book was likely buried beneath the Greek fire formula and the ice silk treatise. A shrill whistle interrupted your thoughts. It was the red-haired street performer. Today, he wasn't sword swallowing, but balancing 3 sticks into the shape of Constantinople's city gates, then letting them collapse suddenly. As you frowned, he swiftly rearranged them into another shape, 3 towers and a wave. The naval warehouse or academic debate: Byzantine historians remain divided on whether the imperial messaging system included gestural ciphers. Some argue street performers were indeed covered operatives, others maintain they were simply hired to create cover noise for real agents. A 2017 discovery of street performer skeletons revealed that 3 of them had dental corrections typical of the nobility, further muddying the debate. Before nightfall, you finally deciphered the tiny indentations along the gold foil's edge. They were musical notations. Humming the tune, you realized it was the cross-fragment verification song that the Armenian merchant sang endlessly in the marketplace. Either this was an ingeniously crafted code or the Empress had been rather tipsy the night before. By candlelight, you unrolled the piece of silk the Persian merchant had so carelessly left behind. At first glance, it seemed to be an ordinary pomegranate pattern until you splashed some wine across it. Don't mourn the loss, it was your cheapest bottle. Slowly, faint blue veins began to emerge across the fabric, some kind of invisible map painted with seaweed extract. By Saint Demetrius' cursed bones. You muttered, recognizing the layout of Constantinople's underground aqueduct system. 3 routes were marked in cinnabar, all converging beneath the palace's ice cellar. It was either the most elaborate restaurant location plan in history or an infiltration map. Fun fact: Byzantine aqueduct workers were among the empire's most secretive professionals. They used specially crafted oil lamps to detect airflow currents. Archaeological analysis revealed that the lamp oil often contained frankincense, possibly to mask the acrid fumes of volatile Greek fire ingredients. As you meticulously copied the map with a gilded pen, you noticed the stitching along the silk's edge was unusually precise. Unraveling a few gold threads, you uncovered a sequence of musical notes embroidered with silk fine as hair, perfectly matching the melody etched on the Empress's gold foil. Now you were certain, this was no coincidence. Someone was using the city's merchant networks to pass messages, and somehow, you had become their unwitting mailbox. A familiar owl call sounded outside. The pitch was so off, it was clearly a human imitation. You opened the secret window. The red-haired street performer was dangling from a rope ladder, grinning, and handed you a steaming scroll of parchment. Freshly copied from the bathhouse. He whispered. The document recorded a clandestine conversation between a naval commander and a Venetian envoy. The steam had blurred most of the text except for 2 recurring words: ice and fire. Academic debate: whether Byzantium hosted an international commercial spy network has been hotly debated between scholars at Oxford and the Vienna School for a decade. The discovery of an Arabic travelogue recounting Greek merchants transmitting military secrets via loom patterns added fuel to the fire, but precisely how this was done remains a mystery. By dawn, you had pieced together a chilling outline. Someone planned to use ice silk as a medium to trigger an explosion near the Greek fire formula. And according to the markings on the silk, this someone intended to strike in 3 days during the Hippodrome celebrations for the Emperor's birthday. You blew out the candle and spotted the metal-clawed parrot perched on a ceiling beam, preening its feathers. It tilted its head at you, eyes gleaming with an eerie blue light, almost the exact shade of Greek fire. The knock at the door in the early morning chilled your spine more than an executioner's axe. You slid back the bolt, only to be greeted by tax officer Nicoporo's signature fake smile, the kind that makes even gold coins tremble. The golden embroidery on his purple robe was worn to a shine, the mark of a man who had made a long and profitable career out of squeezing others dry. Routine inspection, he purred, slipping into your warehouse like an eel, fingers already flipping open your ledger. I heard you generously donated a shipment of silk to the Hagia Sophia last week. His quill hovered above the parchment, waiting for you to explain why this donation happened to match the exact amount of missing customs tax. Fun fact: Byzantine tax officials carried portable scales to test silver content in coins. In 2015, one such scale was recovered from a shipwreck, its base engraved with a microscopic cheat sheet, proving that corruption has always been an art form. You handed over your specially prepared alternate ledger, with carefully exaggerated entries about rodent damage. Those furry culprits were currently eavesdropping from the rafters. Nicoporos pretended to believe you right until his assistant accidentally kicked over a clay jar, sending 300 Venetian silver coins clattering across the floor. Ah! You exclaimed, slapping your forehead. The very missing funds I was about to report stolen. Meanwhile, you discreetly slid a pouch of Persian gold into his sleeve. Nicoporos waited thoughtfully and suddenly became forgetful. Come to think of it, the new tax law does allow exemptions for rodent-related losses. Academic debate: historians continue to argue over how deeply corruption affected Byzantium. One camp believes systemic embezzlement accelerated the empire's fall, while another points to ledgers showing 90% of taxes did reach the treasury, possibly because officials had mastered creative accounting, a practice the Venetians would later perfect. When Nicoporos finally left, you retrieved the real ledger from its hiding spot. Flipping to the last page, your blood froze. Someone had used a fine needle to pierce near invisible holes in the parchment, forming a floor plan of the imperialized cellar, annotated with tomorrow's date, and a tiny drawing of a burning candle. Another whistle sounded outside. This time, dangling from the rope ladder below the red-haired performer was an unexpected figure, Mahmoud, in women's clothing, his wig askew, frantically gesturing a throat-slashing motion at you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, this prize is robbery. Sister Maria struck your counter with her crucifix, with enough force to terrify any genuine thief. Spread between you lay 20 bolts of white altar silk, a battlefield of haggling. You wiped the holy water from your face. She always managed to accidentally splash some while brandishing the cross, and pointed out a subtle gold pattern in 3 of the bolts. This is woven from genuine angel hair. Naturally, it commands a premium. In truth, it was simply blended with Egyptian flax, but ever since a certain bishop had claimed to see the Virgin's image on one of these fabrics, the price had skyrocketed tenfold. Fun fact: Byzantine monasteries often embroidered important documents into the backs of altar cloths. A 13th century holy vestment was discovered to contain stitched debt records, including, O Demetrius the silk merchant, 35 gold coins witnessed by God. Midway through negotiations, you noticed something odd about Sister Maria's rosary. The beads, supposedly wooden, flashed with a metallic gleam. As she gestured passionately, one bead rolled to your feet. The moment you picked it up, you recognized it: fine Venetian spring steel, typically used for compact crossbow mechanisms. A nun with a taste for crossbows, you asked quietly. For shooting heretical rats, she replied without blinking, slipping a folded note into your hand. Tomorrow at morning prayer, the choir will require new purple ribbons. Understood. Academic debate: whether the Church engaged in Byzantine espionage remains unsettled. However, Vatican archives reveal that a 6th century abbot regularly sent encrypted spiritual reports to the imperial court, using the same grape juice revealing method employed by royal spies. You waited until deep night to hold the note over candle flame. No words appeared, but a finely drawn map of the Hippodrome's underground passages emerged instead. 7 ventilation shafts were marked with different saint symbols. The most alarming, next to the shaft marked with Saint Demetrius, someone had drawn a burning jar of Greek fire. As you debated whether to inform the emperor, the warehouse cat suddenly arched its back and hissed. Looking up, you saw the metal-clawed parrot fiddling with the window latch, a tiny scroll tied to its talon. And the first streak of dawn was already tinting the sea crimson. Moonlight turned the warehouse courtyard into a black and white chessboard. You directed your workers with the precision of a midnight chess master. 6 burly men carried bundles of silk wrapped in horsehair blankets, concealing the borrowed Greek fire protection manuals from the naval warehouse. The covers still bore suspicious scorch marks. Easy, you hissed, watching them handle the bundles like newborns as they loaded them onto the donkey cart. If we spark a flame, we'll be tomorrow's street performers, the flying kind. Fun fact: Byzantine porters used donkey milk to lubricate cart axles. It reduced noise and prevented overheating. Archaeologists discovered traces of honey and sulfur in an ancient wheel groove, suggesting it might have been an early fire suppressant formula. As you paid the workers in copper coins, a pale hand suddenly emerged from the shadows and gripped your wrist. It was Mikhail, the mute slave, the palace's official ice courier. He shoved a rapidly melting block of ice into your hands, gesturing with slicing motions. Frozen in the center was a sheet of gold foil, unmistakably from the same batch as the one the Empress had sent you. "Is this some new fashion in accessories?" you muttered, chiseling away the ice. The foil revealed a terse warning: 7th shaft is a trap. It was signed with a simplified banner of the Hippodrome. Suddenly, Mikhail yanked you downward. A squad of purple-cloaked guards marched past the alley, torches raised. Leading them was none other than Nikiporos, the tax inspector from earlier. He now carried a familiar porphyry box, but this time headed toward the Venetian quarter. The crates the guards bore sloshed ominously with liquid. Even from a distance, you could smell the acrid blend of pine resin and sulfur. Academic debate. The dominant theory holds that Greek fire was transported in sealed lead containers. Yet fragments of ceramic jars found in the Constantinople sewers suggest that beeswax was added to reduce sensitivity. A 2018 experiment recreating this mix blew out half a laboratory and the project was promptly suspended. When the danger passed, Mikhail had vanished, leaving only a trail of wet arrows on the ground pointing toward the harbor. More troubling still, one bundle was missing from your cart. The one embroidered with the Persian cipher had disappeared. Nearby, a few drops of purple liquid glistened with the telltale pearlescent sheen of Tyrian dye under the moonlight. My dear old friend. Madame Desiree tapped your cheek with a perfumed fan. Your usual spot, your special friend is already waiting. She lingered on the word special, all while deftly lifting 3 silver coins from your sleeve, a higher fee than last time. Inflation truly spares no one. Upstairs, in a corner room, the red-haired performer was peeling an apple with a dagger. The peel coiled into a long spiral, uncannily resembling the Hippodrome's racetrack. The 7th shaft is indeed compromised, he began bluntly, but not where you think. The apple peel snapped. He pointed at the table, the apple seeds arranged in the outline of Constantinople, with a clove placed at the ice cellar's location. Fun fact: high-end Byzantine brothels often used spiced decor for intelligence work. Archaeologists uncovered large quantities of nutmeg shells at one site. Their volatile oils masked the scent of parchment and heightened alertness, making them ideal for interrogations. As you leaned in to examine the makeshift map, a familiar wing beat thudded outside. The metal-clawed parrot burst into the room, a purple silk thread tangled around its talons. The red-haired man unwrapped it, half a burned roster of the palace guards. Mahmud's locked in the old water dungeon, the performer suddenly spoke in flawless Greek, a stark contrast to his usual mangled market accent. Tomorrow night, they'll test an improved Greek fire at the Hippodrome. He flipped the roster over. Faded notes on the back read, ice silk plus white phosphorus equals silent flame. Academic debate: whether the Byzantines mastered the refinement of white phosphorus is still hotly contested between the Cambridge and Heidelberg schools. In 2017, a 6th century alchemical manuscript was found in a monastery cellar, describing ghost fire distilled from urine, though the key portion of the recipe was chewed away by rats. A commotion downstairs interrupted the conversation. Desiree knocked urgently 3 sharp taps. The tax inspector is here for a health inspection. The red-haired man vaulted out the window in an instant. You were shoved into the adjoining room, right into Sister Maria. She was no longer wearing her habit, but was strapping a miniature crossbow to her thigh. Don't ask, she said, handing you a fragrant sachet. Deliver this to Lydia. Tell her the spices have arrived. The sachet was surprisingly heavy. Inside, your fingers traced the shape of a small key, its teeth etched into the form of a double-headed eagle. The symbol of the Royal Library's treasure vault. The curfew bell sawed through the night sky of Constantinople like a dull blade. You moved swiftly along the walls, each step landing precisely in the patrol's blind spots, a route you'd walked 100 times before, though tonight every shadow might conceal one of Nicephorus's agents. The sachet from Sister Maria burned against your chest. When you'd pried it open moments earlier, besides the key, 3 metal spheres the size of pearls had rolled out. Under the moonlight, they shimmered with an eerie blue-green, exactly the hue of burning Greek fire. Now the tiny orbs clicked softly in time with your heartbeat, as if ready to ignite at the slightest jolt. Fun fact: during Byzantine curfews, authorized night travelers carried phosphorescent algae pouches as identification. Modern spectral analysis shows that these algae glowed brighter when exposed to human sweat, possibly the earliest form of biometric verification. Turning the final corner of the spice market, you froze. 50 paces ahead stood the side entrance of the Royal Library, guarded by 2 Varangian soldiers in lion helmets. These Nordic mercenaries were notorious for their incorruptibility. Worse, perched at their feet was the metal-clawed parrot, cocking its head to peer curiously at the stack of crates where you hid. Just as retreat seemed as dangerous as advancing, a faint sound came from above. The red-haired performer leaned halfway out of a drainpipe, lowering a silk cord fine Byzantine weave, strong enough to hoist a grown man. As you climbed, you overheard the guards below. "Do you smell lavender? It's that silk merchant who always stays too long at the brothel." Academic debate. Sources on the Varangian Guard's sense of smell are conflicting between Scandinavian and Greek accounts. In 2020, an experiment using reconstructed lion helmets confirmed they did enhance certain scent detection, though exactly how remains a mystery. Reaching the second floor ledge, the performer's dagger had already sprung the window latch. You both slipped into the dark archives, rows of parchment scrolls exuding the scent of mildew and knowledge. Suddenly, the creak of an iron door echoed nearby, followed by Nicephorus's sickly sweet voice. "His Majesty takes particular interest in the preservation of these ancient texts." The performer shoved you into an empty bookcase. Through the slats, you watched the tax official approach the treasure vault, oil lamp held high. Trailing behind was a tall, slender figure in a Persian robe who turned just as the moonlight caught his face. The eyes were unmistakable, Mahmud. But now, they were cold as steel. No trace of the marketplace merchant's usual charm remained. You slipped through your own door like a startled herring, back pressed against the wooden panel, chest heaving. Moonlight filtered through the window lattice, casting a web of shadows over the floor right where the hidden compartment lay beneath your bed. Your one true safeguard, the ledger recording every unofficial transaction you'd ever made. The moment your fingers brushed the compartment's trigger, your blood turned to ice. Fresh wax residue stained the edges of the bricks. Someone had tampered with it while you were away. You slowly drew out the ledger. It felt lighter by the weight of exactly 3 silver coins, the thickness of the ledger's secret inserts. Fun fact: Byzantine merchants often used specially treated pages for secret accounts. Texts would reveal a second layer when soaked in wine. One such ledger in the British Museum tested positive for at least 7 types of invisible ink, including one made from sea urchin bile. Hands trembling, you flipped to the page on your Persian dealings. Where once a dense inventory of shipments had been recorded, an unfamiliar, elegant script now sprawled across the margin. "The 7th well is prepared. I await the dance." More chilling still, beside it, a tiny drawing of a balance scale. One side weighed a vial of Tyrian purple dye, the other the ominous silhouette of a Greek fire pearl. A faint metallic scrape echoed from outside. You snuffed the candle just as a crossbow bolt thudded into the bedpost. Its fletching was wrapped in a purple ribbon, the exact shade used in Lydia's cloak lining. Judging from the angle, the archer was perched atop the bakery where you bought bread each morning. Academic debate. The training methods of Byzantine assassin orders remain hotly contested. Procopius's secret history contradicts church records entirely. In 2016, a monastery mural was discovered depicting assassins disguised as street performers, allegedly trained in hand signals, though scholars remain divided on its authenticity. Curled in the darkness, you suddenly noticed a rhythmic gleam between the floorboards. Lying flat, you saw that some kind of phosphorescent powder had been sprinkled into an arrow formation pointing toward the long unused flue behind the hearth. Just wide enough for a slender figure to climb to the roof. As you hesitated, the false compartment beneath the bed gave a soft click. Sliding it open revealed the rare key from the nun, resting beside 3 unfamiliar black pearls. Their surfaces were pitted with honeycomb-like cavities eerily reminiscent of ignition nodes for a Greek fire projector. Far off in the direction of the hippodrome, the first streaks of celebration lights began to pierce the night sky. The clamor of the festival faded into the distance, becoming the sound of distant waves. You curled up on the old rug by the hearth, the 3 black pearls glowing eerily in your palm. Exhaustion finally triumphed over fear. Your eyelids grew heavier than the gates of Constantinople. Suddenly, you stood in the heart of a boundless desert. Moonlight silvered the dunes, and silk streamed ghost-like in the wind, each bolt embroidered with familiar patterns, Persian ciphers, Venetian codes, the nun's crossbow, the tax collector's false smile. In the distance, Lydia's purple cloak flickered in and out of view. Beside her walked the red-haired performer and Mahmud. They seemed like lifelong friends. "Choose, child of silk," whispered the wind. "Flame or frost?" You looked down to find not pearls, but a double-sided coin in your hand. One side bore the blue flame of Greek fire, the other the crystalline pattern of ice silk. Fun fact: Byzantine merchants often drank opium-laced calming teas. Residues of these brews left distinctive patterns on their teeth, which archaeologists now use to identify frequent Silk Road travelers' enamel striations revealing east-west journeys across centuries. The dream shifted. Now you stood at the center of the hippodrome. From the seventh well flowed not water, but streams of silk, swirling high to form the shape of a massive double-headed eagle. In the stands, Nicephorus was presenting the porphyry casket to the emperor, while the empress caught your eye and winked. Her pupils shimmered with the unmistakable hue of Tyrian purple. When dawn's first light brushed your lashes, the 3 pearls were still clutched in your hand. Outside, the horns of the festival were already sounding. You didn't know if this was the end of the plot or merely its beginning, but a voice whispered within, "Today, the hippodrome will need a great deal of ice silk." The night fell like the softest Persian woolen blanket, draping the spires and domes of Constantinople. Far off, the waves of the Golden Horn lapped against the piers with the rhythm of a merchant counting coins. The secret symbols embroidered on your silks, the conspiracies swirling in violet dye, the menace of Greek fire. For now, they drifted away on the starlit breeze. Perhaps tomorrow you would face the tax collector's questions, or decipher the final code. But tonight, let it all sink beneath the deep sea of dreams. The moonlight of 1,000 years ago was no different from tonight's, just as gentle upon the worries of merchants and the ambitions of emperors alike. The racing heartbeats, the breathless pursuits, the narrow escapes, all would one day become no more than a footnote in the chronicles, or a fragment unearthed by some curious archaeologist. So close your eyes, traveler of the Silk Road. Let Byzantium's moon weave for you a dream of silk, one belonging to this night alone. Softly, slowly, it will carry you toward a calmer harbor. Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to 1750 BCE, specifically to a bustling riverside office where you, yes you, are about to make a terrible career choice, becoming a Babylonian accountant. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and current time. Let us see who's listening from the future while we dive into the past. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The Tigris River glows like liquid copper as you stumble into the scriptorium, bare feet sticking to clay tiles still cool from the night. A senior scribe named Kuiya shoves a reed stylus into your hand, which, by the way, feels suspiciously like being handed a plastic spork to dig a tunnel. "You'll carve numbers today," he says, pointing to a fresh clay tablet the size of a dinner plate. You squint at the cuneiform symbols already baked into the wall as reference. They look like bird footprints dipped in ink, except birds probably had better handwriting. Kuiya demonstrates: press the stylus at an angle, drag, lift. Suddenly, you're not just making marks, you're writing the world's first spreadsheet. Fun fact: those wedge shapes there, why accountants still call it balancing the books, even though you're definitely not balancing anything. Unless you count the precarious stack of tablets threatening to topple onto your sandaled foot. Here's where history gets relatable. Your third attempt at a shekel symbol looks like a drunk chicken danced on the clay. Kuiya sighs, the sigh of every overworked manager since the Bronze Age, and hands you a wet rag. Mesopotamia's version of Control+Z academic debate alert: some tablets show erased calculations, but historians still argue whether these were honest mistakes or ancient creative accounting. Looking at you, temple wine inventory. A breeze carries the scent of baking bread from the workers' quarters. Your stomach growls. Kuiya smirks and slides a date across the table, the original hang in their motivational poster. Your fingers cramp around the reed stylus as you stare at the tablet before you, not just clay anymore, but a ledger holding the fate of entire barley harvests. This is the moment you realize, you've become Mesopotamia's most terrifying creature, an accountant with authority. The tablet is divided into neat columns, each representing a farmer's debt to the temple. Your job: make the marks that will determine whether they eat next winter. No pressure. The stylus trembles in your sweaty palm as you press the first wedge-shaped numeral, a simple 5 for 5 bushels ode. Here's the wild part: those vertical and diagonal wedges you're carving, they're about to invent math anxiety. Every transaction requires converting between 3 different counting systems: base 10 for general math, base 60 for astronomical calculations, hello, modern minutes and seconds, and special symbols for fractions. One tablet found nearer actually shows a scribe's practice sheet with the ancient equivalent of "I will not mess up the math" written over and over. Your concentration shatters when a commotion erupts outside. A farmer is arguing with the temple guard about his recorded debt. "But the flood ruined half my crop," he pleads. Kuai rolls his eyes and mutters about excuses since the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is why the Babylonians invented receipts, little clay envelopes called bulli that held token versions of contracts inside. Scholars still argue whether these accounting systems drove civilization forward or just created the world's first bureaucracy-induced headaches. The University of Chicago has an entire department debating if that smudge on tablet BM 92689 is a calculation error or someone's attempt at early performance art. As you finish your 10th tablet, your stylus slips, creating an accidental wedge. In a panic, you correct it into what might be a barley symbol or possibly a very abstract sheep. Kuai will either praise your creativity or assign you to latrine duty. Tomorrow's problem. The midday sun beats down like a hammer on anvil when Kuai suddenly grabs your wrist. "Enough numbers," he whispers, eyes darting toward the high priest's office. "It's 8 o'clock. Before you can process this, he's pulling you into a shadowy alcove behind the grain storage jars, the Bronze Age equivalent of the office break room. Your nose wrinkles at the pungent smell hitting you first, a mix of fermented dairy and something suspiciously alcoholic. Kuai produces a clay pot with the flourish of a magician, revealing its contents: thick, creamy cheese submerged in date wine. "Priest's ration," he says, winking. But what Enlil doesn't know. He dips a hunk of barley bread into the concoction and hands it to you. This is the original power lunch, literally. Analysis of dental plaque on Babylonian remains shows these temple workers were basically running on a diet of fermented dairy and honey. The cheese acts as slow-burning fuel while the date wine's sugar gives an instant focus boost. Modern nutritionists would faint, but when you take your first bite, the caramel-like sweetness mixed with tangy cheese makes your tired brain spark back to life. As you eat, Kuai shares scribe survival tips in hushed tones. Always volunteer for inventory duty near the beer storage. The best reeds for styluses grow by the third canal bend. If the high priest visits, hide personal tablets under your tunic. Historians still debate whether these snack breaks were tolerated or officially sanctioned. Some temple records mention divine inspiration periods, while others complain about unexplained cheese shortages. A sudden noise makes you both freeze, footsteps approaching. Kuai shoves the pot into your hands just as the high priest rounds the corner. Your life flashes before your eyes. Until he reaches past you to grab his own hidden snack stash. The three of you sit in silence, dipping bread into the communal pot. Some traditions transcend time. The afternoon sun transforms your workspace into a clay oven. You watch in horror as your carefully calculated tablet, still wet from this morning's entries, literally wilts like a dying flower. The vertical lines you carved for barley received now slump drunkenly to the left as the clay softens. That perfectly rendered 30-gur measure symbol now looks like a melted candle. Kuai barely glances up from his own work. "First summer?" he asks, chuckling at your panicked expression. He casually flips his baking hot tablet onto a woven reed mat, the Babylonian version of a laptop cooling pad. Rule number 1, morning for math, afternoon for copying. The gods made shadows for a reason. You learn the hard way that cuneiform has different states of matter: morning clay, firm, perfect for crisp wedges; noon clay, dangerously malleable. Your 7 just became a maybe 3. Afternoon clay, archaeological future rebel. A temple slave boy runs by with a dripping water skin, sprinkling the floor to cool the air. You catch droplets on your fingers to pat your neck, realizing this is history's first documented case of workplace climate control. The Babylonians were masters of passive cooling. Thick mud brick walls, strategically placed reed screens, and those all-important afternoon naps we'll get to later. Academic mystery, some tablets show calculations that appear to change mid-equation. Dr. Selina Andrews from Cambridge argues these are early attempts at algebraic variables, while Dr. Haroun claims they're just sun-drunk scribal errors. That famous floating 60 in the Lursa records probably some poor accountant falling asleep on his stylus. As you attempt to salvage your oozing tablet, the high priest's shadow falls across your workspace. He studies your liquid mathematics, then surprises you by nodding approvingly. Good, he grunts. The soft clay remembers. He taps your slumped numerals now resembling waves and declares them an auspicious omen from Enki, god of wisdom. You make a mental note to claim all future mistakes as divine messages. Count the sacred flock, they said. It'll be easy, they said. You clutch your tally stick like a lifeline as 200 woolly anarchists stare you down in the temple courtyard. The lead ram, a beast with horns like crescent moons, locks eyes with you and deliberately steps on your sandal. This is how Babylonian accountants learn the first rule of data collection: reality hates spreadsheets. The high priest's instructions seemed simple enough: record each sheep, their markings, and offspring for the royal archives. But nobody warned you that temple sheep recognize census takers and actively evade them. Lambs born yesterday already perfected the art of hiding behind their mothers. Your reed stylus is delicious. Rip your third writing tool today. Kuai leans against the gate, chewing a date pit with amusement as you try to corral a particularly rebellious ewe. That one's you two Shamash's problem now, he says, pointing to the shepherd god's statue. Just estimate like everyone else. Here's where history gets hilarious. Archaeologists found a single tablet from Nippur showing 3 different sheep counts for the same year. The numbers mysteriously decrease after each audit, with a note blaming divine intervention. Modern scholars suggest either rampant theft or scribes finally saying close enough. Scholars still fight over whether these gaps represent early statistical margins of error or the world's first documented case of creative accounting. The British Museum's Dr. Lydia Petrovich insists the discrepancies align with known lambing seasons, while Yale's Professor Jones maintains it's proof ancient shepherds were the original spreadsheet wizards. As the sun dips low, you resort to the oldest trick in the book, bribery. A handful of salt licks later, the flock finally lines up like fuzzy soldiers. Your final count: many sheep, very healthy, praise Enlil. Kuaya nods approvingly. Now that's temple-worthy record-keeping. Your eyelids feel like they're weighted with lead when the temple gong rings before dawn again. You stumble into the scriptorium to find Kuaya already awake, annoyingly alert, and pressing a tiny clay cup into your hands. The thick, molasses-black liquid inside smells like toasted earth and honey. Drink, he orders. Unless you want to spend the morning carving debt records into your own thigh by accident. This is shishgalu, the original accountant's fuel. A paste of ground sesame seeds, dates, and enough honey to make a god hyperactive, designed to slap your brain awake with a 1-2 punch of fat and sugar. Modern energy drinks wish they had this kind of staying power. You take a sip and suddenly understand how Babylonians built ziggurats before breakfast. The effects are immediate. Your fingers move faster. The cuneiform symbols make sense. That backlog of grain receipts crushed before the sun clears the ziggurat. You're basically a scribe superhero until crash. The crash hits around mid-morning. Your stylus slips for the 3rd time, carving what might be a tax record or an avant-garde interpretation of a sleeping goat. Kuaya, watching with amusement, slides another cup toward you. The priestly ration, he says solemnly, is 2 servings. Historians still argue whether shishgalu was a productivity tool or just early sleep deprivation. Cuneiform medical texts warn against overuse may cause a man to see numbers in his dreams, but temple records show it was stockpiled like gold. Some tablets even describe a shishgalo protocol for royal accountants during audit season, basically the ancient version of pulling an all-nighter. As you sip your second dose, the high priest strolls by and pauses. For a terrifying moment, you think you're busted until he reaches into his robe and adds a pinch of something fragrant to your cup. Cinnamon, he murmurs. From Dilmun. For precision. Then he walks off, leaving you buzzing like a beehive with better handwriting. Your head nods forward for the third time in as many minutes, chin nearly grazing the half-dried tablet before you. The shishgalo has worn off, the afternoon heat presses down like a wool blanket, and your stylus has somehow carved the same symbol 15 times without your conscious input. Then disaster. Your elbow slips. The carefully calculated grain totals for the northern provinces become an avant-garde smear across the clay. As you jerk awake, your horrified gaze meets Kuia's across the work table. But instead of wrath, you see recognition. Without a word, he stands, grabs your wrist, and marches you toward the date palm grove behind the temple. Sleep, he commands, pointing to a shaded patch of packed earth. Before you accidentally declare war on Elam with a misplaced decimal. You collapse like a sack of barley. The last thing you see is a palm frond tracing lazy circles against the blue sky, Mesopotamia's first mobile, spinning just for you. What happens next will echo through history. You wake to golden light and birdsong, your face imprinted with reed marks from the mat. Something is different. The numbers in your head have aligned. That tax distribution problem that haunted you yesterday solved. The missing sheep from last week's count remembered. Your brain feels like a cleared irrigation ditch, everything flowing exactly where it should. Kuia watches you stretch with a knowing smirk. The priests will call it divine inspiration, he says, handing you a fresh tablet. But between us, it's just not being exhausted. Scholars still debate whether Babylonian efficiency stemmed from advanced mathematics or simply better rested bureaucrats. The famous Sipar productivity tablets show a 30% increase in records completed after midday breaks, though some argue it's because scribes worked faster to earn their naps. As you return to work, the high priest eyes your refreshed demeanor. He says nothing, but the next day, a new rule appears on the scriptorium wall: when the sun kisses the ziggurat's peak, all shall seek shade. The great Babylonian siesta experiment has begun. You're smoothing a fresh tablet when a scrap of clay taps your shoulder. It's smaller than your palm, covered in tiny, frantic cuneiform. You glance around, no one's watching, so you tilt it toward the light and decode the message: third pillar at moonrise. Bring your spare stylus. Tell no one. Welcome to the scribe underground. While priests debate celestial omens, you and your fellow accountants have built something far more powerful: Mesopotamia's first professional network. The temple's shadowed corners hum with whispered exchanges. An Nippur-trained scribe demonstrates how to carve wedges backwards for faster receipts. Someone's circulating a reed pressurized stylus sharpener that shaves minutes off prep time. A harried archivist trades you 5 blank tablets for your secret cheese stash location. The real currency mnemonics. Senior scribes hoard memory tricks like Dragon's Gold. Tonight's prize: a rhythmic chant for converting bushels to shekels that's scandalously set to the tune of a tavern song. You practice under your breath until the numbers dance themselves into place. Historians still puzzle over certain tablets filled with seemingly random word lists. Dr. Amin Akaldi's controversial theory argues these were ancient cheat sheets, coded reminders for overworked accountants. That repeated fat goat notation probably a tax category, but maybe someone's dinner order. The meeting breaks up at the sound of sandals on stone. You pocket your new mnemonic tablet just as Kuia rounds the corner. He takes one look at your innocent expression and sighs. If you're going to rebel, he mutters, slipping you a clay token good for 1 free beer at the Dockside Tavern, at least do it where I don't have to report you. As moonlight filters through the reed screens, you realize something profound. Bureaucracy may have built Babylon, but it's the shortcuts that keep it running. The oil lamp sputters as you squint at yet another tablet, its cuneiform symbols swimming before your tired eyes. The night watchman's third round has come and gone, and your back protests from hours hunched over the scribe's bench. Across from you, Kuya rubs his temples and mutters something unflattering about Nana, the moon god supposedly in charge of nighttime illumination. Turns out even ancient accountants had crunch time. A stack of unfinished temple inventory tablets glares at you accusingly. The upcoming festival means every jar of sacred oil, every ceremonial robe, every sacrificial goat must be accounted for, and the priests want it done by dawn. You stab your stylus into the clay with more force than necessary, leaving a wedge deep enough to plant barley in. Fun fact: the oldest recorded complaint about overtime pay comes from a Babylonian tablet circa 1750 BCE. A scribe named Lil writes, "The overseer demands tablets under the moon's gaze, yet my ration remains unchanged. Should not extra hours mean extra beer?" Spoiler: he didn't get the beer. Kuya suddenly perks up and digs into his belt pouch. "Almost forgot," he says, producing 2 small clay tokens. "From the night scribe vault." He hands you one. It's stamped with a crude star symbol. "Trade this with the baker's daughter at dawn. She owes us." You're about to ask what exactly the baker's daughter owes when a commotion erupts outside. The night watchman barrels in, wide-eyed. "Lion!" he gasps. "Spotted near the date stores." For one glorious moment, you think this might mean an early dismissal. Then the high priest strides in holding more oil lamps. "Excellent," he booms. "While the guards handle the beast, we'll have quiet to work." He drops a fresh stack of blank tablets on the bench with a thud that shakes your soul. As Kuya groans and reaches for the shishgalo paste, you realize something timeless. Whether it's 1750 BCE or 2023, overtime always smells like burnt lamp oil and poor life choices. Your cheek peels off the clay tablet with a sound like wet mud separating from sandals again. Another afternoon, another failed attempt to rest your head on something that isn't your own accounting work. The stylus marks now permanently embossed on your face are basically cuneiform tattoos at this point. Kuya observes your plight while casually reclining against what appears to be a rolled-up reed mat. Then with the dramatic flair of a merchant unveiling exotic spices he unties it. The bundle unfurls to reveal a lumpy oblong sack stuffed with wool and river grasses. "Behold," he declares, "the mishkad. The world's first ergonomic pillow smells faintly of sheep and nostalgia." You press tentative fingers into its yielding surface. The outer layer is woven linen, the filling a mix of carded wool and soft marsh reeds that rustle like a gentle river current when you squeeze it. Kuya demonstrates the proper technique. Wedge it between your raised writing bench and collarbone to create a 45-degree nap angle. "Priests get cedar shavings in theirs," he whispers conspiratorially. "But this lol keep your neck straight for the afterlife and midday breaks." Archaeologists still debate whether these pillows were status symbols or practical tools. The British Museum's specimen still bears a faint cheek imprint. Some say it's from a scribe, others insist the pattern matches a dozing temple cat's ear. As you test Kuya's invention, the high priest sweeps in. Your heart pounds as his shadow falls across the mishkad. Until he nods approvingly. "Good posture pleases Inki," he intones, then surprises you by producing a tiny linen pouch. "Lavender from the mountains. For precision." The wink he gives suggests even gods understand the value of a proper nap. That afternoon, curled around your fragrant pillow as bees drone in the temple garden, you dream of floating down the Euphrates on a boat made of tax records. They're all perfectly balanced. The high priest's sandals slap against the tiles as he storms into the scriptorium, his beard quivering with outrage. "You!" he thunders, pointing at you napping peacefully against your mishkad. Your eyes fly open to see the entire scribal staff frozen mid-carving, styluses hovering over clay like startled dragonflies. Then divine intervention. Before the priest can continue his tirade, Kuya leaps up with the energy of a man who has rehearsed this moment. Revered one. He proclaims, arms raised skyward. Behold the sacred trance. The numbers flow through this one like the Tigris through its banks. He gestures dramatically to your half-finished tablet, where your drowsy calculations somehow produced a perfect lunar cycle prediction amid the barley tallies. A beat of silence. Then the high priestess' expression shifts from fury to fascination. He picks up the tablet, tracing the figures with unexpected reverence. The sleeping scribe sees what waking eyes cannot, he murmurs. And just like that, your nap gets a holy rebrand. By sundown, the temple buzzes with new doctrine. Strategic dozing equals receiving Inki's wisdom. Yawning mid-calculation equals channeling divine breath. Your pillow equals the ear of the gods. Modern scholars cringe at how quickly napping became institutionalized. The University of Chicago's Dr. Lila Cohen notes, what began as human necessity became divine mandate with better pillows. Meanwhile, Oxford's Professor Gupta maintains the inspired nap theory, citing improved astronomical accuracy in post-siesta records. The next morning, you arrive to find your corner adorned with a new read screen. And a junior scribe assigned to fan you during contemplation periods. As you settle into your now ceremonial nap, you catch Kuya's smirk. He mouths two words that LL echo through your career: genius. Play along. A clay projectile whizzes past your ear and shatters against the scriptorium wall. You duck behind a stack of tax records as another missile, this one shaped suspiciously like a sheep tally, splats harmlessly into a jar of date paste. Across the room, a red-faced scribe from the Iana temple mimes crude gestures at your colleague. Welcome to the first great nap war. What began as one sleepy accountant's accident has escalated into full-blown temple rivalry. The priests of Or now boast of dream-fueled mathematics, while Lursa's scribes claim their 2-hour siestas produce divinely balanced ledgers. You've personally witnessed visiting scholars from Nippur casually draping themselves over their writing benches while loudly discussing their superior prophetic REM cycles. Kuya slides beside you, arms full of reed mats. They're onto us, he whispers. Iana's scribes started napping on purpose yesterday. He nods toward the courtyard where 3 accountants from rival temples sprawl dramatically across stone benches, ostentatiously snoring. One has even tied a sacred dream veil over his eyes which looks suspiciously like a dyed linen tunic sleeve. Historians still argue whether this competition improved ancient record-keeping or just created better rested bureaucrats. The SIPAR productivity tablets show a 40% increase in calculations completed post-nap, alongside a 300% rise in petty complaints about snoring disturbances. The conflict reaches its peak when the high priest summons you. Heart pounding, you enter his chamber to find him examining your latest work, a flawless set of lunar observations completed after your now famous contemplation session. From tomorrow, he declares, our siestas will be official. He hands you a clay token bearing the image of a closed eye. 1 hour. No more. And for Enlil's sake, tell Kuya to stop gloating at the Lursa scribes. As you exit, you spot the Iana temple's lead accountant lurking outside. He takes one look at your token, pales, and sprints toward the docks, probably to book urgent passage home. The nap arms race has begun. The city holds its breath as the royal herald climbs the ziggurat steps. His bronze-tipped staff strikes the stones in time with your pounding heartbeat. You stand shoulder to shoulder with scribes from every temple in Babylon, your official dream veil now standardized and temple-issued dangling unused around your neck. By order of Hammurabi, light of the land, the herald booms, unfurling a scroll taller than a man, from this day forth. A bead of sweat trickles down your back. The infamous law code already dictates everything from barley prices to marital disputes. Will it now condemn your sacred naps as laziness? All temple accountants shall observe mandatory rest when the sun reaches its zenith. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. The herald continues, listing provisions with bureaucratic precision. 1 hour of shaded repose, 2 during Mercury retrograde. Apparently the stars agree you need extra sleep. Official contemplation mats to replace those haphazard reed bundles. Double rations of shishgalo paste for post-slumber clarity. You lock eyes with Kuyat, both of you struggling to maintain solemn expressions. His shoulders shake with suppressed laughter as the herald solemnly declares napping a sacred duty to preserve numerical harmony. Scholars still debate whether Hammurabi truly believed in inspired sleep or just recognized well-rested scribes made fewer errors. The famous siesta tablet found at Mari shows calculations before and after the edict errors dropped by 60%, though someone later scribbled still hate mornings in the margins. As the crowd disperses, you notice rival temple scribes already scheming. One group whispers about advanced dream interpretation techniques, while another examines a suspiciously plush-looking new pillow. The high priest catches your gaze and sighs. This isn't over, his expression says. Just state-sanctioned. That afternoon, as you recline on your official mat watching palm shadows creep across the courtyard, you realize something profound. You've just witnessed the world's first workplace wellness policy. Take that, 21st century. Your stylus flies across the clay tablet with unnatural precision, each wedge-shaped numeral landing exactly where it should. The afternoon sun slants through the reed screens, painting golden stripes over your work, a revolutionary new system for tracking compound interest that came to you in a vivid post-siesta dream. Across the courtyard, junior scribes whisper about your divine inspiration, but you know the truth, you're just well-rested for once. The Babylonian siesta experiment has yielded unexpected dividends. Temple records now show fewer mystery shortages. Turns out tired scribes can't tell apart 5 and 6 wedges. That infamous Lur-Sayuruk border dispute solved after both sides' accountants napped on it. Even the palace has adopted contemplation hours, though rumor says the king just uses them to snack. Kuya sidles up, examining your interest calculations. You realize, he murmurs, this means we'll have to calculate more numbers, right? He points to your elegant percentage formulas. Now they LOL expect this quality all the time. Historians still argue whether napping drove innovation or just made existing systems run smoother. The Berlin siesta scrolls contain tantalizing references to dream geometry, while skeptics note Babylon's famous astronomy leaps coincided suspiciously with the edict's implementation. As you stroll through the gardens at dusk, you spot something revolutionary, a clay placard by the workers' quarters depicting a sun symbol crossed by a horizontal wedge. The world's first do not disturb sign. Nearby, a potter snores peacefully beneath his wheel, his apprentice guarding his rest with the seriousness of a temple acolyte. The high priest finds you smiling at the scene. You started something, scribe, he says, surprising you with a rare compliment. Then, ever the bureaucrat, he ruins it by adding, your new interest tables will need copying. 30 sets. By dawn. But even this can't dim your revelation. Sometimes progress isn't about working harder, but resting smarter. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most revolutionary calculation of all. 4,000 years from now, under the glare of museum lights, a gloved hand will brush dust from a cracked tablet. The archaeologist, let us call her Dr. Amira Khalid, will squint at your handwriting, that distinctive slant to your wedges she's seen on 12 other tablets from this dig site. She won't know your name, but she'll recognize you, the scribe who always pressed just a little deeper in the top left corner of each symbol. Your legacy lives in the little things, that doodle of a sleeping stick figure tucked between tax records. The cheese stain on tablet BM 92689 still visible after millennia. The way your estimated sheep counts somehow always matched the priest's expectations. Tonight, as you etch the final wedge into your last tablet of the day, something makes you pause. Instead of just your official seal, you carve 2 extra symbols beneath the totals, your personal mark, the one Kuya taught you. It's not your name, exactly, but a playful combination of barley and closed-eye wedges. A secret signature for the ages. Future scholars will debate whether these personal marks represent early individualism or just bored accountants. Dr. Khalid's controversial paper will argue yours depicts a laborer's quiet rebellion, while her rival will insist it's clearly a devotional symbol to Nisaba, goddess of writing. The truth, of course, is that you were just really proud of that nap-inspired interest calculation. As you set the tablet aside to dry, Kuya tosses you a date from across the room. It arcs through a beam of sunset light, a perfect, ember moment suspended between epochs. You catch it with one hand, sweet juice bursting on your tongue, as the call to evening prayers echoes over Babylon. Somewhere beyond time, a future archaeologist licks her lips in sympathetic taste memory, never knowing why. The oil lamps gutter low now, their warm glow softening the sharp edges of clay tablets and reed styluses. Outside, the night wind whispers through date palms, carrying with it the distant laughter of dock workers and the rhythmic lapping of the Euphrates against its banks. You stretch, feeling the pleasant ache of a day's honest work in your shoulders, the comfortable weight of routine and ritual. The numbers have all been tallied, the records set straight or near enough. Somewhere in the temple archives, your little barley and closed eye symbol rests against cool clay, waiting patiently through centuries for its moment in the light. Let the future wonder. Let the scholars debate. Tonight, there's just the quiet satisfaction of work done well, rest earned honestly, and the knowledge that even the mightiest civilizations are built one well-rested scribe at a time. The stars over Babylon shine no differently than they will 4,000 years from now, when someone halfway across the world listens to this story and smiles, their own eyelids growing heavy. The circle remains unbroken. Sleep well, time traveler, the ancient world will keep until morning. The old man's hands tremble as he gestures you closer, his fingernails stained a permanent green from decades of crushed leaves. Around his hut, plants lean toward him unnaturally, as if straining to catch his fading voice. Listen, he rasps, placing your palm on a seemingly dead twig protruding from a clay pot. At first, nothing. Then a vibration so faint you think you imagined it. The gardener begins humming, his voice cracking with age, but the twig responds instantly. Tiny buds swell and burst forth like time-lapse footage, leaves unfurling with audible pops. Modern scientists would call this resonance germination, but the lab that proved its validity lost funding in 2018. That recording of his voice, the frequencies matched exactly with monsoon wind patterns over Lake Texcoco. A child rushes in with a basket of peculiar seeds, each one wrapped in a thin layer of what looks like gold leaf. His memory packets, she explains. The old man painstakingly presses one to his forehead, then to yours. Suddenly you see, a young gardener learning to distinguish 80 varieties of medicinal sage by taste alone, the exact moment he first heard a cactus sing during a solar eclipse. These weren't just seeds, they were biocapsules, coated in conductive plant resins that transfer tactile memories. IBM's neuromorphic computing division is currently tearing its hair out over this one. As twilight falls, the old man does something extraordinary. He snaps off a piece of the now flowering twig and plants it in your palm, closing your fingers around it. It will remember me, he whispers. Sure enough, years later when you uncurl your fingers in a London lab, the cutting will still be alive and inexplicably blooming out of season. The lead botanist will quit her job to study indigenous horticulture, muttering about quantum entanglement in vascular plants. His last breath comes as a night-blooming cereus opens outside the window, its perfume flooding the hut. The other gardeners nod knowingly. Of course the flowers would come to collect their greatest student. You half expect to see petals closing around him like gentle hands. The night air carries the last traces of that impossible perfume as you walk back through the sleeping gardens. Moonlight transforms the chinampas into floating islands of silver, each plant humming its own quiet song to the stars. Somewhere, a butterfly messenger dances between blossoms on its final delivery. A snail trails luminous mucus across a stone, writing in a language only the dawn will decipher. You press the living twig to your chest, feeling its slow, steady pulse against your own. The old man was right, the flowers do remember. They remember the touch of his fingers, the rhythm of his chants, the particular way moonlight bent through his obsidian mirror. And now, against all odds, they'll remember you too. As your eyelids grow heavy, the garden's whispers blend seamlessly with the rustling of your bed sheets. The twigs' faint vibrations become the distant purr of a contented cat. That last lingering scent of vanilla and soil, probably just your imagination. Probably. Sleep now, little gardener. The flowers will keep watch. Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the floating gardens of Tenochtitlan, where flowers don't just bloom, they talk back. And no, I don't mean in some poetic, metaphorical way. I mean actual vibrations, whispers in the wind, and a whole agricultural system that modern science is still struggling to explain. You might want to sit tight for this one, because by the end, you'll never look at your houseplants the same way again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment below telling me what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. I love imagining all of you tucked into bed, half asleep but still curious enough to hear about Aztec horticultural magic. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You're kneeling in a canoe, the damp wood pressing into your shins as you glide through the canals of Tenochtitlan. The air is thick with the scent of marigolds, vanilla orchids, and something earthier, wet soil, crushed herbs, the faint metallic tang of the lake itself. Around you, the Chinampas, those legendary floating gardens, rise from the water like emerald islands, their edges lined with willow trees whose roots knit the soil together. A gardener in a simple cotton loincloth paddles past, humming under his breath. His fingers trail in the water, and as he passes a cluster of blooming Chempa alxocoatl that's marigolds to you, he pauses. He leans down and murmurs something, not to himself, not to the gods, but to the flowers. And then, I swear to you, the petals shiver in response. Now, before you dismiss this as some shamanic hocus pocus, let us get one thing straight: the Aztecs didn't just think they were talking to plants. They had an entire agricultural science built around vibrational frequencies. Modern experiments have shown that certain sound waves do stimulate plant growth, something about resonance triggering cellular activity. The Aztecs knew this. They just called it the flowers answering. Here's a fun fact you won't find in most history books: Aztec gardeners had specific songs for specific plants. Want your squash to grow faster? There was a chant for that. Need your maize to resist pests? Another tune. And the wildest part, some of these plant songs were so precise that Spanish chroniclers wrote about how certain flowers would wilt if the wrong melody was sung near them. Of course, historians still argue over whether this was actual communication or just very, very observant horticulture. But here's the thing: when you're kneeling in that canoe, watching a gardener coax a stubborn bud into opening with nothing but a whisper, the distinction starts to feel academic. The scent of damp earth clings to your fingers as you press them into the warm soil of the Chinampa. Tiny beads of sweat form on your forehead, not just from the humidity, but from the sheer concentration required for this work. One wrong move, one careless whisper, and the maze might decide you're not worth listening to. A weathered hand suddenly grips your wrist. Lower, murmurs the old gardener beside you. The corn wants to feel your heartbeat. You blink, but obey, sinking your fingertips deeper until your knuckles disappear into the dark loam. And then there. A faint, rhythmic pulsing. At first you think it's your own blood rushing, but no, the vibration is coming from the earth itself. Modern agronomists would call this subsonic root communication. The Aztecs called it Cintiatl's whisper, the voice of the young maize god. Recent studies have shown that corn seedlings actually emit low-frequency sounds around 220 Hz, if you're curious when stressed or thirsty. The kicker: ancient planting chants recovered from codices hover at exactly that frequency. Coincidence? The archaeologists currently arguing about it in academic journals certainly think so. As you work, your guide plucks a fat earthworm from the soil and grins. "Frolics, little messenger," he says, letting it coil around his finger before gently returning it to the earth. Here's something your high school biology teacher never mentioned: Aztec gardeners domesticated earthworms. They bred specific varieties for different crops, like living fertilizer factories. One Spanish priest even wrote home in horror about Indians who keep worms as pets and feed them like sacred birds. You're just starting to relax when a sharp click makes you jump. The old man is tapping two obsidian blades together above a struggling seedling. The sound is unnervingly crisp, like raindrops on stone. Within minutes, the plant's leaves perk up visibly. Scientists today are still debating whether this was primitive sonic therapy or something far more sophisticated. But right now, kneeling in this floating garden with the old man's chanting vibrating in your chest, you're pretty sure you just witnessed a 600-year-old secret. A flash of iridescent orange streaks past your face so close you feel the breeze from its wings. The gardener beside you doesn't even flinch as the monarch butterfly alights on his shoulder, its delicate legs tapping in erratic rhythm against his sun-darkened skin. "Ah," he murmurs, tilting his head as if listening. "The northern fields need rain." You stare, dumbfounded, as he plucks a tiny hollow reed from his belt and gently attaches it to the butterfly's leg. Inside, rolled tighter than a pine needle, is what looks like a flower petal with markings. The gardener smiles at your confusion. "Our fastest messengers," he says, giving the butterfly's wings an affectionate flick. It takes off in a burst of color, heading west toward the distant fields. Here's something that'll make your inner nerd squeal: Aztec butterfly mail wasn't just poetic symbolism. Researchers examining pre-Columbian textiles recently found microscopic scales from monarch wings embedded in the fibers always clustered near what appear to be message pouches. Even wilder modern tracking studies show monarch migration routes align perfectly with known Aztec trade paths. Coincidence? The curator at Mexico City's Anthropology Museum has an entire very passionate PowerPoint about why it's not. Your gardening mentor now hands you a gourd filled with a suspiciously glowing liquid. "For your eyes," he says. When you hesitantly dab it on your eyelids, suddenly every butterfly in the garden becomes a blazing comet trail. Turns out the magic potion is just crushed firefly glands mixed with chia oil, an ancient version of contrast-enhancing eye drops. The Spanish later dismissed this as superstition, but modern ophthalmologists confirm the mixture temporarily increases rod cell sensitivity. As you blink away the sting, a whole new world emerges. Those random butterfly landings, they're actually following precise routes between specific flowers. That lazy circling, it's a deliberate pollination pattern modern farmers are only now rediscovering through drone technology. You're witnessing what one exasperated botanist recently called the most sophisticated cross-pollination system before the 21st century. The old gardener suddenly grabs your wrist and pulls you behind a flowering bush. "Watch," he whispers, pointing to a girl no older than 12 kneeling by the water's edge. Her hands move like hummingbirds as she dips cloth after cloth into the lake, each emerging dyed a different impossible hue: sunset orange, deep violet, a blue so bright it hurts your eyes. "Coachabilize palette," the gardener breathes reverently. You notice the girl keeps glancing at a peculiar little jar beside her, its surface crawling with. "Are those snails?" Before you can ask, she plucks one up and squeezes a single drop of glistening mucus onto her current fabric. The orange dye instantly deepens to a fiery crimson that seems to glow from within. Here's the chemical miracle your art history professor skipped. Aztec dyers discovered that certain snail mucoproteins could fix plant dyes at a molecular level. Modern chemists only replicated this effect in 2017 using synthetic polymers, and even then, the color saturation wasn't as vibrant. That jar probably contained Placopurpura pansa, a sea snail whose secretions contain a unique light refractive enzyme. The girl suddenly turns and catches you staring. Instead of being angry, she grins and flicks a droplet of cochineal red at your tunic. It spreads in a perfect fractal pattern, like a blooming flower. "The colors choose their own shapes," she giggles. Turns out Aztec dyers deliberately exploited fluid dynamics, the way dyes naturally diffuse through different fabrics, to create these organic designs. A 2023 materials science paper called it accidental nanotechnology. Your gardener friend is now urgently tugging at your sleeve. Time to go before the dye masters catch you spying. As you slip away, you swear you see the girl whisper something to her snail jar, and the creatures inside actually rearrange themselves into a spiral pattern. Probably just a trick of the light. probably. Moonlight transforms the floating gardens into a silver labyrinth as you tiptoe after the night gardeners. They move like shadows between the raised beds, each carrying a curious object, a concave disc of polished obsidian that catches the pale glow and reflects it downward in concentrated beams. Watch the Izacuantly flower, your guide whispers, directing your attention to a tightly closed bud. As a gardener angles his black mirror just so, something miraculous happens. The petals begin quivering, then slowly unfurl with an almost audible sigh. Within minutes, the night-blooming cereus, which normally takes hours to open, stands fully revealed, its luminous white petals drinking in the amplified moonlight. Modern photobiology confirms this shouldn't work. Moonlight is literally a million times fainter than sunlight, insufficient for photosynthesis, let alone triggering bloom cycles. Yet recent experiments at the University of Mexico City found that certain flowers do respond to concentrated lunar exposure, but only when reflected through volcanic glass. The lead researcher published her findings under the delightfully honest title, "We have no idea why this works." Your reverie is interrupted by a sharp elbow to your ribs. One of the gardeners presses a cool, smooth object into your palm, a smaller version of the obsidian mirrors. "For your own garden," he murmurs. As you examine it, you notice faint etchings along the rim, not decorative patterns, but what look like lunar phase calculations. Turns out these moon mirrors doubled as agricultural calendars, with markings that track optimal planting and harvesting times. Suddenly, all the gardeners freeze. A soft chime rings out from the temple complex, some signal you don't understand. As one, they turn their mirrors upward, creating a shimmering web of reflected moonlight across the entire garden. In that moment, every night-blooming flower in the Chinampa simultaneously opens its petals. The air fills with an intoxicating perfume as the gardeners begin a low, rhythmic chant, not to the flowers, but to the moon itself. A 16th-century Spanish chronicle dismisses this as moon madness, but NASA's 2024 lunar greenhouse experiments yielded some uncomfortably similar results. Their report cautiously concludes, certain plant behaviors under concentrated lunar exposure warrant further study. You smile, pocketing your stolen moon mirror. Some secrets refuse to stay buried. Your fingers hover over the sunflower's spiraling seed pattern, tracing the hypnotic geometry. The gardener beside you chuckles at your fascination and plucks a single seed, placing it precisely where the curve should continue. "Count the ways," he urges in a voice like rustling leaves. As you step back, the mathematical perfection takes your breath away. Each seed head forms a flawless Fibonacci spiral, the same pattern found in galaxies and hurricanes. But here's what your high school math teacher never mentioned: the Aztecs didn't just observe these patterns, they engineered them through selective breeding. Codices recently deciphered reveal precise planting instructions to guide the sunflower's dance. A child suddenly tugs your sleeve, pressing a warm tortilla into your hand. Biting in, you're startled by an almost floral sweetness. "Sunflower bread," the gardener explains. "From seeds planted by the counting song." Modern nutritional studies show these geometrically planted sunflowers produced seeds with 20% higher protein content, a fact that made a certain Monsanto researcher quit his job to study traditional methods full-time. Your lesson is interrupted by gasps from the water's edge. A young apprentice has dropped his counting stones into the canal, disrupting the day's planting calculations. But the head gardener just smiles and produces a curious object, a hollow gourd filled with dried seeds. As he shakes it, the seeds arrange themselves against the inner surface in, you guessed it, perfect Fibonacci curves. Archaeologists long dismissed these counting gourds as children's toys, until a 2023 study proved they function as primitive analog computers for calculating optimal plant spacing. As the sun dips low, you notice something peculiar. The sunflowers aren't just facing the sunset, they're tilted at precise angles to maximize last light exposure. The gardener sees your realization and nods approvingly. "The flowers remember their numbers," he says, as if this explains everything. Maybe it does. After all, MIT's latest solar panel arrays just happen to use those same angles. A high-pitched hum makes you turn just in time to see a blur of emerald feathers hover inches from your nose. The gardener beside you holds perfectly still as the hummingbird's needle-like beak probes the scarlet blossom he's cradling, not randomly, but with surgical precision. "Watch the doctor at work," he murmurs. The bird's wings beat so fast they vanish, creating a miniature vortex that lifts pollen in a golden cloud. Then impossible, it reverses direction mid-air to dust the next flower. Modern slow-motion footage shows this exact maneuver requires 34 precise muscle adjustments per second. The Aztecs called it Hutzilin medicine, and they designed entire gardens as avian operating theaters. Your guide suddenly presses something cold into your palm, a tiny obsidian blade no larger than your thumbnail. At first glance it appears decorative, until you notice the microscopic grooves along its edge. These weren't jewelry, they were pollination tools. Researchers at the Botanical Garden of Mexico recently recreated these blades and found the serrations match perfectly with certain flowers' stigma grooves. The Aztecs were performing hand pollination so delicate modern scientists need magnifying glasses to replicate it. A commotion erupts near the water's edge. A gardener is frantically waving a feathered staff shaped like a hummingbird. Within moments, 3 actual hummingbirds arrive like tiny EMTs, taking turns diving into a drooping flower. They emerge with their throats dusted yellow, then rocket off toward healthier plants. This wasn't just symbolism. Recent studies show hummingbirds instinctively transfer more pollen to struggling plants, as if sensing they need extra genetic diversity. As you pocket your obsidian blade purely for research purposes, of course, the old gardener winks. "The best doctors wear feathers," he says. You don't argue. After all, Harvard's microrobotics lab just published a paper on hummingbird-inspired surgical drones. Somewhere, an Aztec gardener is smiling. A sharp scent of vanilla and smoke tickles your nose as you follow the gardener into a thatched hut. Inside, shelves groan under the weight of hundreds of clay jars, each sealed with beeswax and marked with intricate symbols. Your guide lifts one reverently. "Our words for the future," he murmurs just as shouting erupts outside. Flames lick at the neighboring storehouse. Gardeners scramble like ants, forming chains to pass precious manuscripts away from danger. You grab a crumbling codex and gasp. The pages are layered petals pressed between thin sheets of tree bark, the text itself written in aromatic oils that still release scent after centuries. Modern perfumers would kill for this preservation technique. The Vatican actually confiscated several such books in the 1500s, believing them to be magical. As you rescue another codex, a corner tears loose in your hands. Instead of text, it reveals a colorful mosaic of dots and lines that somehow form a three-dimensional image of a chili plant when tilted just right. Turns out those decorative patterns were actually stereoscopic planting guides, an ancient version of the lenticular cards your cereal box used to include. The British Museum only noticed this effect last year when a curator accidentally tilted one under museum lights. Smoke stings your eyes as you make your final dash. The gardener presses a small clay vial into your hands, the last memory of the chocolate flower. He coughs. Scientists would later discover this extinct blossom produced a vanilla chocolate hybrid scent now impossible to replicate. When you uncork it centuries later in a modern lab, the fragrance will reduce a hardened botanist to tears. As the fire consumes the last untranslated manuscripts, you realize with a pang that some plant whispers will now never be heard again. But the gardener just touches his forehead to yours. "The flowers remember," he says. And strangely enough, they do. Modern spectral imaging is starting to detect chemical echoes of lost species in surviving garden soils. The ceremonial cup is thrust into your hands, its contents swirling like liquid obsidian. Around you, gardeners sit cross-legged in a circle, their faces painted with intricate floral patterns that seem to shift in the firelight. "The flower dream," your guide whispers as you raise the cup to your lips. The taste is indescribable: earth and lightning, honey and ashes. Within minutes, the torch flames stretch into glowing vines, and you realize with detached fascination that the tattoos on the elder's arms are actually growing, unfurling real leaves that brush against your skin. Modern analysis of residue in similar cups reveals a sophisticated blend of psilocybin, cacao, and a now extinct orchid pollen, a cocktail neurologists call the most targeted hallucinogen in human history. Your vision tunnels, suddenly you are falling upward through layers of soil, past roots that hum with secret conversations. A prickly pear cactus grips your wrist not with spines, but with tiny green fingers, and floods your mind with memories. A drought 50 years past, the exact moment its first flower opened, the taste of a now dead pollinator's wings. UCLA's recent study on plant memory formation would later confirm this isn't pure fantasy. Succulents do retain cellular memories of trauma for decades. When you blink back to awareness, the head gardener is studying you intently. Without speaking, he presses your palm against a young maize plant. Your skin tingles, and somehow you know this seedling is thirsty, that its roots ache for nitrogen, that it prefers morning sun to afternoon. The gardeners call this cochet-loduli flower speech. Modern biofeedback therapists are just beginning to replicate similar states using EEG and plant electrical signals. As dawn breaks, you notice something impossible. The ceremonial cup you drank from is actually growing tiny roots where spilled droplets hit the earth. The gardener just smiles and tucks it into his belt. Good vessels remember their purpose, he says. You don't argue. After all, Harvard's Biomaterials Lab recently managed to grow a functional mug from fungal mycelium. Some knowledge circles back, given enough time. The scribe's feather quill hovers over the bark paper as you hold your breath. With meticulous strokes, he illustrates a squash blossom, except the decoration along its edges isn't artistic flair. Squinting closer, you realize those tiny dots are actually a scale key. 1 speck equals 3 finger widths of growth. Here, the scribe says suddenly, thrusting the quill at you. Your hand trembles as you attempt to add shading to a maize stalk. He clicks his tongue and adjusts your grip. The corn wants to feel your pulse. Modern forensic analysis recently proved Aztec botanical illustrators used heartbeat rhythms to create those distinctive wavy lines, resulting in organic precision no ruler could achieve. A commotion erupts as a gardener bursts in, cradling a broken pot, spilling colorful beads. Except wait, those aren't beads. They're seeds, each variety dyed a different hue and arranged to form a living catalog. The scribe excitedly presses one into the paper, creating a perfect pigment stamp. Botanists at Kew Gardens only recognized this technique last year when they noticed certain codex paintings contained embedded seeds from the very plants depicted. Your lesson is interrupted by an elder unrolling a spectacular scroll. At first glance it's just beautiful flowers, but when you tilt it, the shadows reveal something extraordinary. The plants rearrange into 3D planting diagrams. The petals are actually top-down views of garden plots, the stems showing subsurface irrigation channels. MIT engineers recently used VR to reconstruct these and found the layouts maximize space usage better than modern vertical farming concepts. As ink stains your fingertips, you notice something curious. The scribe keeps dipping his quill into different cups, each producing identical black ink until he whispers something to the liquid. Suddenly one darkens to brown, another greens slightly. Chemical analysis shows these talking inks contained pH-sensitive algae extracts that respond to vocal vibrations. The British Library Conservation Team is still trying to replicate the effect without cracking priceless manuscripts. The first raindrop hits your forehead just as the old gardener grabs your elbow. Too fast, he mutters, dragging you toward a curious stone structure, a series of interconnected basins carved with intricate channels. As the downpour begins, you watch in awe as each basin fills in perfect sequence, the overflow trickling into the next with mathematical precision. Count the heartbeats between drops, the gardener instructs, pressing your palm against a water-smoothed stone. At first it seems random, but gradually you detect a rhythm: 7 quick pulses, then a pause, then 3 slow ones. Modern meteorologists would call this measuring precipitation intensity, but the Aztecs personified it as Tlalic's breathing pattern. A 2023 study in Hydrological Sciences journal found these stone calculators predicted rainfall within 5% accuracy compared to modern gauges. Your fingers trace the channels and discover something astonishing: the grooves aren't uniform. Some are V-shaped, others U-shaped, each designed to alter water flow speed. Engineers at Delft University recently modeled these and found they replicate Bernoulli's principle centuries before European scientists discovered it. The gardener smirks at your amazement. Water remembers its paths, he says, as if that explains everything. A young apprentice rushes up with a clay tablet covered in peculiar markings. The elder studies it, then abruptly starts rearranging potted seedlings. You later realize the tablet was a primitive weather station readout, notches recording wind direction, smudges indicating humidity, even tiny seed fragments showing barometric pressure changes. Certain seeds expand predictably before storms. The Smithsonian calls it the most sophisticated indigenous meteorological system ever documented. As the rain eases, the gardener hands you a hollow reed. For listening to the clouds, he says. When you hold it to your ear like a seashell, you don't hear the ocean, you hear the distant rumble of the next approaching storm. Archaeoacoustics researchers confirm these rain reeds amplify infrasound frequencies from far-off weather systems. Your weather app could never. The market trader slams his fist on the woven mat, sending a cascade of cacao beans skittering toward your feet. Worthless. He snarls at the trembling gardener, who clutches a basket of suspiciously plump beans. Around you, merchants whisper behind their hands, some in awe, others in barely concealed panic. You pick up one of the disputed beans and roll it between your fingers. It's nearly twice the size of normal cacao, with an odd iridescent sheen. The distressed gardener leans close. The new plants. They listen too well, he confesses. Turns out his experimental crop grown using an ancient singing cultivation method produced a record yield, inadvertently flooding the market. Modern economists would recognize this as hyperinflation, but the Aztecs called it Cocotlesatl, chocolate that bites its masters. A priest suddenly parts the crowd, his ornate headdress brushing the market banners. He examines the miraculous beans, then does something unexpected. He bites one in half. After a tense moment, his eyes widen. The god's flavor, he declares. Chemical analysis centuries later would show these mutant beans contained 40% more theobromine, explaining their intense psychoactive effects. The Spanish later burned entire fields of this heretical chocolate, unaware they were destroying what could have revolutionized stimulant science. Your attention is caught by a commotion at the spice stalls. Vendors are frantically repricing everything using a bewildering array of shells, colored pebbles, and is that a jade bead? The monetary system is collapsing in real time. A historian would later compare this moment to the tulip mania crash, except with better-smelling currency. As you pocket one of the infamous beans for research, obviously, the gardener grips your wrist. Tell them to plant fewer songs next time, he pleads. Too late, you already feel the weight of history shifting. After all, the same economic principles would tank the Spanish Empire's mercury mines 2 centuries later. Some lessons must be learned the hard way. The pyramid's shadow stretches across the garden like a giant sundial, except the dark lines don't just mark time. As you watch, a gardener hurries to a specific patch of amaranth, his bare feet aligning perfectly with a carved notch in the stone pathway. Now, he murmurs, plucking seed heads with surgical precision. You step closer and gasp. The shadow's edge bisects the amaranth at exactly 37 degrees, the optimal angle for harvesting without shattering the grains. Modern combine harvesters use laser guides to achieve similar precision, but here it's written in stone and sunlight. Archaeoastronomers recently discovered these shadow calendars track not just seasons, but microclimates. Certain carvings align with wind patterns that affect crop moisture levels. An elder presses a curious tool into your hands, a wooden cylinder studded with irregular crystal fragments. When you hold it up, sunlight refracts into colored dots that land on specific plants. The thirsty ones, the elder explains. Turns out these were primitive spectrometers. The crystals separate light wavelengths to reveal water stress before visible wilting occurs. MIT engineers recreated one in 2022 and found it 80% as accurate as digital soil sensors. Your lesson is interrupted by a shout. A young apprentice has misaligned his shadow measurement, harvesting beans too early. The head gardener doesn't scold, he simply guides the boy's face toward the pyramid. "The stones remember what your hands forget," he says gently. Sure enough, when the shadow reaches a specific carving, the remaining beans practically leap into the harvest basket, perfectly ripe. As the sun dips lower, you notice something extraordinary. The pyramid steps aren't just stairs, each tread is calibrated to cast shadows that trigger different plant responses. One angle stimulates basil to release oils, another tells maize to stop growing taller. The gardeners call this stone wisdom, but a Berkeley biophysics paper recently termed it architectural phytohormone control. The past keeps outsmarting us. The emperor's messenger bursts into the garden clutching a bouquet that makes your eyes water, not from pollen, but from the overwhelming clash of scents. Gardeners immediately stop working and begin sniffing the air like hounds on a trail. One suddenly gasps and rushes to pluck 3 specific marigolds, arranging them in a precise triangle at the messenger's feet. "Ah," says your guide, watching the color drain from the messenger's face. "The flowers say his lord is angry about the jade shipment." Turns out this floral Morse code was the Aztec version of encrypted messaging. Certain scent combinations conveyed complex political statements. Perfume historians recently decoded 7 base notes in these bouquets, but the full vocabulary remains elusive. That marigold triangle, it's the equivalent of typing in all caps. A gardener presses a petal to your wrist, and suddenly your skin tingles with warmth. "Vanilla's cousin," she whispers. "Speaks only to skin." Modern chemists isolated the compound in 2021, a volatile oil that reacts with human sweat to create unique scent signatures. The Aztecs used it as biological authentication. Only certain nobles' body chemistry could unlock secret messages in royal bouquets. Your nose is still burning when a commotion erupts near the compost pits. Someone has dropped a ceremonial arrangement, scattering petals that immediately blacken on contact with the soil. Gardeners rush to contain the damage. Apparently these blackening flowers were the ancient equivalent of acid-burning sensitive documents. Botanists recently identified the culprit as a rare orchid whose cellular structure collapses in predictable patterns when exposed to nitrogen. As you pocket a fallen petal strictly for scientific study, the head gardener catches your eye. He doesn't scold, just presses a sprig of zacate shishi to your temple. Suddenly the garden's scent tapestry unravels before you. That rosemary bush is broadcasting a weather warning, the sage is humming a lullaby to nearby seedlings. The FDA would later ban this psychoactive herb, unaware it temporarily enhances olfactory perception by 300%. Some secrets are too powerful to survive.